Hello everyone, welcome to Black Fog, your guide for drifting off. I know you listen to help you fall asleep, so like and subscribe to Black Fog before we start. Where are you from and what's your time? Now get comfortable and relax. Back when I grew up in rural Minnesota, my mother wanted me to keep in touch with my Scandinavian roots. We haven't lived in the Nordic countries for 3 generations, but there are still a couple of things that stick around. Behavioral quirks, mostly, and a couple of traditions that have been with our family for as long as anyone can remember. Putting porridge out for the forest gnomes was one thing. Mom used to trick me with these dolls that she'd put in the snow and point to, saying, "Don't move too fast, you'll scare them. And let's not talk about dancing around the maypole. That stuff's just embarrassing." But the most peculiar tradition is the one about A Midsummer Night's Dream. I know that's a Shakespeare title, but it's also a traditional Scandinavian thing. It goes a little something like this. On the evening of midsummer, you are to collect 7 kinds of wildflowers. Then you bundle them up and put them under your pillow. If you do, you are supposed to dream of your one true love. Now, I have 3 sisters. They were all about romance and predestination, and I couldn't have cared less if I wanted to. But every year they'd walk hand in hand, collecting wildflowers and putting them under their pillows. And since I was too young to wander off on my own, I had to stick around. That is, until they decided it was my turn. It was my oldest sister who made the call. She was 12 and I just turned 7, but she figured the earlier the better. "You have to tell us what she looks like," she said. "Like if she's tall or thin or fat." "I bet she's fat," said my second oldest sister. "Statistically, she's Chinese or Indian," said the other. "That's where there are most girls." I tried to ignore them, but their cackling got on my nerves. They gathered up some silky aster, blue-eyed grass, silverleaf, wild bergamot, blue sunflowers, and ground plum, but couldn't get a 7th one. They looked around but couldn't find one. I just wanted to go home, so I picked up the first thing I saw, sticking out next to a rusted-out barrel. "How about this one?" I said, holding up a yellow flower with a black spot. "That's a black-eyed Susan," said my oldest sister. "You're gonna marry a Susan," grinned another. "Little Susie Woo gonna love you who," sing-sang the last. I rolled my eyes so hard that they almost popped out of my head as they cackled and teased, putting my hair up in a bow. They bundled up the wildflowers and made me sleep with them under my pillow. I didn't notice anything strange at first, just a night like any other. You have such vivid dreams when you're a kid. Like everything just happens faster. You even sleep faster. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't just a dream. It was an experience. And the worst part is, I didn't even remember it. I just remembered it was bad. Really, really bad. It was so bad that I completely blocked it out. I don't even remember waking up. I just remember laying in the bathtub submerged in cold water. I looked up at my 3 sisters. They looked terrified. My throat was hoarse, and I was wide awake. But I couldn't even remember going to bed. "Does it hurt?" my oldest asked. Her voice was different, lower, careful. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm okay." "It sounded like it hurt," she continued. "Like it really hurt. I think it was a bad dream." "Was it her?" asked my youngest sister. "Did you dream of her?" Couldn't tell. It was just a dark space in the back of my mind that made my pulse shiver when I thought about it. And yet I knew the answer. "Yeah," I said. "It was Black-Eyed Susan." Now, I've been teased by my sister my whole life, but they never teased me about Black-Eyed Susan. They'd never seen me like that. I'd woken up screaming at the top of my lungs, rolling around on the floor. They thought I was having a seizure. They took me to the bathroom while my mom called an ambulance. We didn't talk much about it. They never had me checked for epilepsy, and I was perfectly healthy otherwise. They talked a little about it being some kind of allergic reaction, but I'd never seen a reaction like that. Over time, we came to this unspoken conclusion. that those wildflowers gave me the worst nightmare of my life. And in that nightmare, I saw my one true love, black-eyed Susan. I wouldn't think much about that night over the years to come. It became this distant memory, like your first cold. But every now and then, particularly around midsummer, I would try to remember what that dream had been like, and something inside me would sink into this bottomless hole in my chest. Teased me. I could concentrate and I'd see it, but I didn't want to. To have forgotten was a blessing, and I knew better than to challenge it. But it's a weird headspace to live in, to have concepts such as true love and marriage so closely associated with trauma, especially since all other couples in my life were perfectly fine role models. My mother and father were an extraordinary couple, and while my sisters had some dating life drama, nothing bad ever really happened to them. So as I got into my teenage years, I didn't want to chase girls and flirt. I didn't want to fall in love. I joked about it a lot, but the feeling of meeting my one true love felt like throwing my soul down an endless pit. I tried to rationalize it away. It was just a stupid phase, a quirk. It became like a fun party story to tell in my late teens. It was funny, in a way, saying I used to believe in such things. But there was an asterisk stuck to that story every time I told it. A little white lie. I never stopped believing in it. It started to really bother me when I was about 17. At that point, I'd been in short relationships, and I'd been in love. But I couldn't stop thinking that it wasn't real, that true love was out there, and that it was terrifying, something that would make my heart sink into my stomach. So I decided to just bite the bullet and try the whole thing again, to face my fears. So that midsummer, I put together 7 types of wildflowers again, ending with a black-eyed Susan. As kids, we're very good at handling pain, or at least we're resilient. We have time to heal. But when you're 17, it hits differently. When I went to bed that night, I had cold sweats, and I couldn't stop thinking about what was waiting behind my closed eyes. Would there be a reaction at all, or had I wasted all this time being anxious about nothing? I closed my eyes and tried not to think about it. I counted down from 100, then 200. I twisted and turned, trying to get the sweaty covers to stop sticking to my skin. At the slightest stretch, my eyes would pop open. I'd get this ache in my face from trying to keep them closed. But after hours, something clicked. My muscles relaxed, and I caught a whiff of the flowers from under my pillow. And something inside me screamed at me to turn back, to open my eyes, but it was too late. Felt like looking at the bottom of a pool, but straight ahead. A reflective shimmer, ethereal but physical at the same time. Like a night sky that you can push your hands through. I fumbled with my hands, trying to find something to hold on to. There was this swirl in the back of my head, like having a large drink on an empty stomach. Something reached for me and touched my fingertips. Something as hard as fingernails. Poked and prodded me from different angles. A strange voice seeped through me. Neutral, genderless, and with an unusual pronunciation. "Where have you been?" it asked. I tried to regain my footing, but there was nothing to hold on to. Just these protrusions from the dark. Finally, I felt myself slowing down. A steadiness, control. Something came out of the dark. Eyes so dark that their head looked hollow against the night. A vaguely human skull connected to an infinite mass, like a broken flower growing out of cracked concrete. Muscle and vein contracting and compounding at every angle. Ripples of flesh with every offset heartbeat. It's been so long. Something wrapping around my ankle, tightening. "Come home." My eyes snapped open, but I wasn't awake. I could feel her wrapped around my ankle. I pulled away the covers and watched my foot turn blue. It was bending and I felt nothing. Then the bone snapped. I've never experienced something like that. I've never broken a bone, and experiencing a trimalleolar fracture in the comfort of your own bed is inhuman. It hurts so bad you lose bladder control, and I couldn't do anything but to fall out of bed and writhe on the floor, but the pain wouldn't go away. I just screamed. I tried to reach for my phone, but it's like it refused to let me reach it. A neighbor heard me, Help came. It would take time for the leg to heal, but bones mend all the time. But true love doesn't. I pushed the thought of love and marriage out of my life for over a decade. I would shy away from coy smiles and flowery laughter. Some people thought I had a problem with my sexuality. Others thought I was under some kind of religious repression. I tried to explain that relationships just weren't my thing, but it's hard to explain without a reason. If I was really pressed about it, I'd say it was a childhood trauma that usually stopped the questions. I'd do this for years. A string of short-term relationships where I kept hoping and praying I wouldn't fall in love. Anything to keep me away from that dark space. I couldn't tell what was going to happen if I met someone who'd make me feel things. Real things. But life isn't so simple. It would take me years, but when I turned 31, I met her. Lilia hit me like a summer's breeze the first time I talked to her. It was a birthday party, and she was invited by a mutual friend of ours. Lilia had been working overtime and forgotten all about the party, so she joined at the last minute. She showed up in an oversized hoodie and yesterday's jeans, spending most of the night at the snack table looking at her phone. Her enthusiasm started and stopped at bobbing her head to the music. When I saw that we were out of pretzels, I went up to talk to her. "Looking for snacks?" I asked. "Your mom's a snack," she snapped back. "All right, yeah, but I was talking about the pretzels." She looked at me like I'd struck gold. She'd been so hell-bent on the idea that I was coming up to hit on her that it never even crossed her mind that she'd eaten a full bowl of salty pretzels. She snort-laughed, apologized, and I felt my heart skip a beat. I knew it was trouble. I liked her. Lilia was a work-from-home back-end developer. She spent most of her days trying to steer her team through rough deadlines and absurd last-minute changes. She explained it as trying to teach cats algebra while falling out of an airplane. She cycled through periods of insane stress to weeks of coasting, which she'd made into an absurd routine. Clearly something she couldn't keep up forever. We didn't start dating right away. We chatted a bit and found out we had a lot in common. She'd been dating this one guy since she was 14 years old and had only recently turned single, so she wasn't eager to get back on the market. She didn't mind my vague trauma. She just liked being around me. I think our friends realized we were dating long before Lilia or I did. We just spent time together until one day when we didn't want it to stop. Still, I couldn't help but think of Black-Eyed Susan. No matter how soothing Lilia's snores were, I could still lay awake at night. There was a warmth in my chest as I imagined the smell of wildflowers from my pillow, an ache in my leg where I could touch the scars. If I were to truly fall in love, what would happen? Those nights came more often, from once every 6 months or so to every week. After having dated for about a year, Lilia was eager to help me get over the whole thing. She knew it was a trauma, and she knew I didn't want to talk about it, but she couldn't let it go. And of course she couldn't. She was in a loving relationship with a man who couldn't say he loved her, and all she knew was that something had happened. It got to a point where it was driving a wedge between us. She wanted to help, and I wanted her to understand. And I could only think of one way to show her. I had to do it again. On midsummer, we went outside to pick flowers. Lilia was excited, but her smile faded when she felt how serious I was. I did what I'd done every other time. I picked 6 types, and a final flower would pop out of nowhere. And of course, it'd be the Black-Eyed Susan. I bundled them all up. I could feel a phantom pain cutting into my leg, which gave me a limp. "So what are these for?" she asked. "For sleep," I said. "And I'm gonna need your help." "Sure, yeah. Whatever you need. If it looks bad, I need you to wake me up." "How do I know if it's bad?" I shook my head and took her by the hand. "You'll know." I did some preparations. I had gauze and painkillers. Lilia was prepared to call for help if necessary. She still had no idea what was going on, but I could tell she was nervous. Then again, so was I. Problem was, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, and she watched me. After about an hour, she crawled up next to me. She knew it was something that happened when I slept, but she wanted to calm me down. I need you to see this, I said. It's okay, she whispered. Go to sleep. Promise you'll keep watch. I promise. I didn't turn my head to look. I trusted her. So I closed my eyes, let my breathing slow, and felt my head fill with the smell of wildflowers. It was like waking up again, a mild tingle covering my body, like being draped in spider webs. I blinked and blinked, but it was still dark. A long, drawn-out breath echoed like a field of sighing flowers. Beautiful, a growth coming out of the dark. Translucent, like living glass hardening into soft marble. A woman, dragging her legs through the darkness like she was trudging through a swamp. She grabbed me by the hand, pulling me along. Felt like I was carried through a current. I could see the bedroom from above. I lay there, and Lilia was sitting next to me. I can't really explain what it felt like. Sort of like watching your reflection blink. I could see her struggling to stay awake, nodding on and off. She was trying so hard. Is that what beautiful looks like? Black-eyed Susan asked. I don't even know what you are, I said. Of course you do, she said. I am your one true love. The words slithered, a drawn-out poise in the air. I tried not to look at her. It was like the opposite of staring into a sun. The light in your eyes begin to die, and you can feel yourself grow colder, slower. You can't be, I said. It's impossible. But I am, she said. You love me. She turned her attention to the room hovering in front of us. I could see little tendrils creep under the furniture, reaching for Lilia and me. Long finger-like limbs in layered scales, bending at painful angles. One pulled down her phone. Another moved a chair. Two of them struggled to move the bed. What are you doing? I asked. Passing the time. One of the tendrils closed around my stomach. There was pressure like someone tightening a belt, cut into my hips. Before the pain, I could feel a slight pop. If you love me, why are you hurting me? I asked. How else are you going to get used to it? She asked back. Get used to what? She turned to me, breath reeking of ammonia with every spit of a word. Us. A hand closed around my neck. My eyes flung open. Couldn't breathe. I couldn't feel my legs. I flailed with my arm, reaching for Lilia. She got out of bed, only to find that her phone was gone. What's wrong? She asked. What's happening? She had to cover her mouth when she saw my neck. She grabbed my arm, but the moment she did, something took hold of her. In the corner of my eye, I saw her getting pulled into the other room, clawing at the carpet with a terrified shriek. My left arm rose out of the bed, as if carried by an unseen string. Two of my fingers popped out of their sockets, like a painful countdown. I couldn't scream. I could barely think. No oxygen. Lilia came running back and grabbed me. She pulled on my arm, and something let go. I fell out of bed, gasping for air as she cradled my head in her arms. I could see color returning to my hands as two fingers turned purple. I didn't feel a thing, but I would in a couple of seconds. Hold on, Lilia said. Hold on. Her phone was gone. She bandaged my fingers and tried to keep them straight. I'm sorry, I gasped. I'm so sorry. She just shook her head, trying to process what had happened. There were no words, we just stayed there on the floor. But I could see something in the corners of the room, little quirks and shades. Something was waiting for me to let my guard down. What's hurting you? She asked. What is it? Something broke in me as I swallowed my words. But Lilia deserved the truth. I think she loves me. Over the coming weeks, I tried my best to explain. Lilia was terrified. She'd never seen anything like it, and there was no explanation that could settle her nerves. It's one thing to know someone you care about has trauma, but it is another thing entirely to experience something impossible that can make or break you. But Lilia didn't break. She started asking questions. Why was I targeted? What was this thing? What did it want? But things were getting strange. It's as if thinking about black-eyed Susan brought her closer to us in a physical, literal way, like we were building towards something. I would spot movement in the shadows. I'd notice furniture out of place and hear creaking doors in the middle of the night. And of course, it had to be her. She was playing with me. Lilia would stay up at night reading about various Scandinavian traditions. The cast iron scissors under the pillow, the midsummer pole, the yearwalk, trolls, elves, dwarves, and gnomes. She gave me lists of things to ask my parents about, to see if our family had been targeted by something ancient or evil. But weeks would come and go, and we wouldn't be anywhere close to an answer. And the shadows would grow longer. Things would disappear. And every night, when I closed my eyes, I'd catch a whiff of earthy wildflowers. Things would quickly progress beyond tricks and shadows. At one point, I was tripped while walking down a flight of stairs. Another time, something pressed down on the gas pedal, sending me straight through a red light. It's a miracle no one was hurt. Lilia wouldn't go unscathed either. Electronics would break or go missing. Odd sounds would wake her up at night. She told me that sometimes she'd see a silhouette outside the window, as if someone was trying to catch a peek of us. Every time she looked closer, it would turn out to be fallen leaves or a peculiar branch. It was stressful, but there wasn't really an option. What else could we do but to stick together and love one another? I don't remember the moment we moved in together. It just made sense, since we spent all our time together anyway. She just moved more and more of her stuff in, and all of a sudden her place was pretty much empty. So yeah, we lived together. It wasn't really a conscious decision. Lilia had a couple of rough ideas about what that thing might be. She had a binder with ideas ranging from Arthurian mythology to djinn and some kind of Polish bird demon. None of them fit perfectly though, and frankly, it was such an odd thing for it all to be tied to this one ancient tradition. How could this thing be my true love? What was I missing? We figured it had to be something connected to that very first night back when I was a kid, when they had to put me in the bathtub to wake me up. For a full year, all we did was try to make it to the next day. It affected pretty much every aspect of our lives. The way we slept at night, the way we cooked, the way we did our laundry. There'd always be something messing up the rhythm of the day. It exhausted us, not just mentally and physically, but socially. We stopped going out. Hell, we barely even talked. Instead, we kept our heads down and tried not to think about it too much, silently hoping for the problem to solve itself as Lilia's binder gathered dust. But once the next midsummer came around, there was a difficult discussion to be had. We can't live like this. She'd sat me down at the kitchen table. The light bulb had burned out somehow, despite only being 2 weeks old. I'm sorry, I said. I wouldn't blame you if I'm not going anywhere, she said. You know that. So what do we do? She looked around. The kitchen faucet was leaking again. I suppose we ought to try something, she said. You got any suggestions? She could kill us, I said. We can't go there. Maybe we don't have a choice. I just sat there in the dark, counting the seconds. She was right, of course, but that didn't mean I had to like it. As midsummer came, we decided we would do this together. We got a single large pillow and gathered the flowers together. We didn't say a word. We just walked among the wildflowers as a low rumble lingered on the horizon, a damp taste in the air as a storm brewed. But to me, all I could see was the woman I loved, and how she carefully brushed her hands against the tall grass. Even now, she could find something to appreciate. Tradition, ritual, and myth be damned. At that moment, there wasn't a force in the world that could convince me that she was anything but my actual true love. We rounded out our wildflowers with a black-eyed Susan. It was hidden next to a rusted-out barrel, as if trying its best to hide. But like every other year I'd done this, I'd find one. And with all 7 wildflowers in hand, we bundled them up and wandered home hand in hand. We hugged each other tight as we went to bed. Some way, somehow, we would make it through the night. We had to. When I opened my eyes, something felt different. I thought I was standing in sand, but it was more like a fine concrete dust. The moon covered most of the night sky, but I couldn't see any stars. There were black trees in the distance, leafless and skeletonized by years of thirst. Along the horizon was a single large tree, tall enough to almost reach the moon itself. An apocalyptic vision, if anything. "Who are you?" A melodic voice, kind but unsure. I turned around. "Lilia?" My first thought was that she looked taller, but that wasn't it. She was the same as always. It was me that had gotten shorter. My hands were smaller. I looked down at the 7-year-old version of myself, still dressed in my most comfortable childhood jammies. Lilia didn't really sound any different, but a child's ears hear things in other ways. She had the most beautiful voice. "It's me," I said. "Somehow, you're really cute," she smiled. "But I don't get it." "I don't either. Maybe we're not supposed to." "Maybe." We wandered down a trail hand in hand. There was no one around. No wind blowing through dead plains. No birds in the sky. No chirping cicadas and no rustling leaves. Just feet on dust. "There's no one here," I said. "This can't be it." "Did we do it wrong?" she asked. "I don't think so. She's usually here by now." Lilia blinked, looking around. Then something dark settled over her eyes. "What if she is?" She let go of me and brushed her arms up and down in a self-hug, something she usually did when stressed. We wandered around for what felt like hours. Nothing happened. No one came to disturb us. It was just her, me, and nothingness. No black-eyed Susan, and nothing to tear us apart. "Does this mean you're my true love?" she asked. "I mean, I am dreaming of you. That would make you mine too." I smiled. "I thought that was occupied." "I thought so too, but there was no one there to challenge that claim. We just smiled at one another. That had to be it. Despite it all, something good had to come out of this. But no matter where we went or for how long, nothing happened. We started to worry. We weren't waking up. We didn't get hungry or thirsty or tired. It was just this complete stage of emptiness. We would walk down forgotten paths for what felt like hours, strolling past sand-burnt concrete ruins. I don't know how much time passed. It might have been days, it might have been months. It was impossible to tell, and Lilia always had this amazing ability to make every moment pass by in a flash. She was impossible not to love. Even then, and even there, we'd make jokes and laugh, though I couldn't get over the feeling of being stuck in my younger self. You don't realize how much you've changed until you step back into old shoes like that. Then I noticed something, a flicker of yellow. Right there, behind a rusted-out old barrel, was a black-eyed Susan, the same yellow flower I'd found on that fateful midsummer night as a kid. I don't know how I recognized it, but I did. It was the same flower, it had to be. I picked it up and showed it to Lilia. "Strange." "Ha," I said. "Only one of these I've seen around. I wonder what it does," she said. "You think it means dash?" Her voice cut out. The light warped in front of me, blurring like I was watching through a thin layer of rushing. I could feel a tingle in my eyes. Lilia looked different, further away. "Don't go," she called out. "What are you doing?" "I'm not. I just picked this," I dash. I held it out and dropped it, giving her one last flower. We drifted apart. Something shifted. My head rolled back, and I felt this intense heat settling into my head. Then a coolness, someone trying to lower my temperature. Young voices, terrified. Lilia drifting further away, screaming at me to stay with her. Her voice goes from beautiful to desperate to something else. She would scream how much she loved me, and then scream at how much she hated me. I would leave her in that place for what would equate to eternities, for her to twist and turn in a place where she'd have nothing but her thoughts and regrets, where a starless sky would seep into her, whispering things to do, ways she would play whenever I returned, her head spinning with tales of jinn and mares and demons. It would just be seconds passing as I felt her disappear, but in those seconds there would be eons. Long enough for a body to forget what humans looked like, for a mind to forget what love is supposed to be, for a word or a phrase to change. True love. An ammonia-reeking scream reflected off a fractured space as she reached for me, trying to pull me back through the breaking light. A hand so warm that it burned my face. How could I be so cruel as to leave her for endless time to suffer? How could I be so selfish? Black-eyed Susan. Lilia, my one true love. Then I woke up. My head burst through the water as I looked up at my three sisters. I was 7 years old, and still in my jammies, submerged in the bathtub of my childhood home. And as healthy young minds do, my memories healed themselves, sealing away a trauma for me to uncover years down the line. Life would turn out the same way. Awkward teenage years, short relationships, and I'd come back to that broken place time and time again, and she would play her games, reminding me of the betrayal she felt, and I wouldn't understand. That is, until one night when I woke up alone. We'd gone to bed together, but only one had made it back. I'd lived a life twice, and I hadn't even realized it. I stumbled into the shower, set it to cold, and collapsed. I could just think of one thing to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Another view of the world from behind a shimmer, be it warm tears or running water. Today, I'm 47, never married, no serious dating. I go back to Lilia every year, hoping I can find something to remind her of what she used to be. I've tried bringing things along, something to bring her back with me. I've yet to find anything useful. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes I try to stay a little longer, but the pain is unbearable. I suspect one day she'll kill me, and I won't come back. I suppose that's the only way this can end. I try not to think about it, but when I do, I try to convince myself that I will end up the same way as her. Maybe we can find solace in our madness. Maybe we'll live together in a paradise of dust and strange moons. I don't know. I don't think that old tradition just shows you true love. I think it will take you to a place where you can meet. But perhaps that place isn't what it used to be. Maybe there used to be more flowers and dancing. I've asked my sisters about what they've seen the times they've done this. All they tell me about is handsome men and blue skies. I guess we don't all go to the same place. After all, true love isn't the same for everyone. If there truly is someone for everyone, well, then we must face some hard facts. They could live across the world. They could have passed away. Or maybe they're just not what you expected. But the older I get, the less I worry. Maybe I'll wake up in that bathtub a third time years from now. And if not, then at least I get to see her again. There must be something of Lilia left in Black-Eyed Susan. There has to be, or else she wouldn't still be my one true love. It's not a job most people dream of, I guess. I prepare the dead for their final goodbyes. It's quiet work, mostly. Precise. I've seen a lot in my time here, but nothing prepares you for some things. And nothing prepared me for him. This started about a month ago, maybe a little more. It's all a bit fuzzy now, for reasons that will become clear. I remember the day it shifted, though. I'd just finished with a young woman. A girl, really. Late teens, maybe early 20s. The report said suicide. Gunshot to the face. A messy, tragic end. Her body was odd. Not in a gruesome way, not more than usual for that kind of trauma. But her shoulders, they seemed to sag just a little too much, even in death, even with me working to make her presentable. As if she'd been carrying something immense for a very long time. Her parents, when they came to make arrangements, were devastated, of course. They kept saying she'd been struggling with anxiety. Kept talking about a weight. Said she always complained about a terrible weight on her shoulders. A physical burden nobody else could see or understand. They said she insisted it wasn't just a feeling, it was real. I nodded, listened. Grief does strange things to people, makes them fixate on details. I did my work, tried to offer what little comfort I could. She was buried a few days later, and then he started appearing. The old man, Every morning, without fail, when I arrived at the mortuary building, he'd be there, waiting, leaning against the cold brick wall by the entrance, or sometimes just standing, swaying slightly, like a dried-up reed in a non-existent wind. He was old, impossibly old, it felt like. Not just wrinkled and gray, but ancient. Skeletal is the only word that comes close. His skin was like old parchment, stretched so tight over his bones you could see their outline, his cheekbones, his jaw, the knobbly joints of his fingers. He was abnormally thin, as if he hadn't eaten a proper meal in a century. His clothes were rags, thin and dirty, offering no protection against the morning chill. And every single day, the same routine. I'd see him from down the block, a knot tightening in my stomach. I'd try to walk a little faster, maybe look at my phone, pretend I didn't see him. It never worked. As I'd approach the door, he'd shuffle forward, his movements slow, agonizing. One hand, gnarled and trembling, would extend towards me. His eyes, sunk deep in their sockets, were like old, clouded marbles, but they'd fix on me with an unnerving intensity. "Spare change, son?" His voice was a dry rasp, like sandpaper on wood. Just a little something. For an old man, always the same words, always that same pleading yet somehow demanding tone. He never got aggressive, never raised his voice. Just that persistent, quiet begging. The first few times, I felt a pang of pity. He looked so wretched. I gave him $1, maybe $2. He'd snatch it with surprising speed, his thin lips pulling back in what might have been a smile, or maybe just a grimace. Then he'd shuffle away, disappearing around the corner. But he was back the next day, and the next, and the next. My pity started to wear thin. It became an annoyance, a daily irritation I had to navigate just to get to work. Why me? There were other people going into the building, other businesses on the same block. But he only ever approached me. He'd be there when I arrived, and gone by the time anyone else showed up. It was like he knew my schedule. I started to ignore him. I'd walk past, eyes straight ahead, headphones in even if I wasn't listening to anything. He'd still try. That raspy voice would follow me. "So? Just a little something." I'd feel his gaze on my back until I was through the door. It made my skin crawl. The building manager saw him a couple of times, shooed him away. He'd go docile as a lamb. But the next morning, he'd be back, waiting for me. I began to dread going to work, not because of the deceased I had to care for, but because of the living ghost at the door. He never touched me, never got too close, but his presence was a constant, gnawing pressure. Felt targeted. I wondered briefly if he was some distant, destitute relative of one of the families I'd served. But that didn't make sense. His appearance was too extreme, too unsettling. And this all started, I was sure of it, right after the young woman, the one with the weight, was laid to rest. The thought flickered, then I dismissed it. Coincidence. This city has plenty of desperate people. But the daily ritual continued. The skeletal figure, the outstretched hand, the raspy plea. Some days I'd give in, shove a bill into his hand just to make him go away, to stop that awful, expectant stare. He never said thank you, just took the money and vanished. Other days, I'd steel myself and walk past, the guilt and annoyance warring within me. This went on for weeks, felt like months. My sleep started to suffer. I'd see his face in my dreams, that skeletal, waiting figure. I was jumpy, irritable. My colleagues at the mortuary noticed I was on edge. I just shrugged it off, said I wasn't sleeping well. How could I explain this? That an ancient-looking beggar was singling me out every morning? They'd think I was losing it. Finally, one morning I snapped. I'd had a particularly bad night, filled with those hollow, staring eyes. As I approached the building, there he was, same spot, same pose. "So? A little help for an old man." "Look," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I can't keep doing this. You need to find somewhere else to be. He just blinked, slowly. That hand remained outstretched. Just a little something, son. Frustration boiled over. No, not today. Not anymore. You need to leave me alone. He didn't react, didn't flinch. Just kept that hand out, his gaze unwavering. It was like talking to a wall, a particularly creepy, emaciated wall. That was it. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police, I told him, my hand shaking slightly as I dialed. This is harassment. He watched me dial, his expression unchanging. It was unnerving. He showed no fear, no concern, just patience. The dispatcher took my report. Loitering, persistent begging, causing distress. They said they'd send a car when one was available. I stood there, a few feet from the old man, waiting. He waited too, perfectly still. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant city sounds. Felt like a showdown, a ridiculous, pathetic showdown. A patrol car pulled up about 20 minutes later. 2 officers got out, young, looking bored. I explained the situation, how this man was here every day, how he only approached me, how it was becoming a serious issue. They looked at the old man. He just stood there, looking frail and harmless, a picture of pitiable old age. One of the officers, a woman, sighed. Sir, she said to me, he looks pretty harmless, and, well, he's on a public sidewalk. Technically, he's not doing anything illegal by asking for money. But it's every day, I insisted, and he only targets me. It's unsettling. The other officer, a burly guy, chimed in. Look, we can ask him to move along, but he'll probably just be back tomorrow. These guys, they find a spot. He shrugged. Maybe, the woman officer suggested, her tone now slightly patronizing. You could just give him a few dollars? Might be easier than calling us every day. He looks like he could really use it. I stared at them, incredulous. That was their solution? Give him money? I felt a surge of helpless anger. So you're not going to do anything? We'll talk to him, sir, the burly one said, already walking towards the old man. Tell him not to bother you. But honestly, there's not much more we can do. They had a quiet word with him. I couldn't hear what was said. The old man nodded a few times. Then the officers came back to me. He says he won't bother you again, sir, the woman said. Hopefully that's the end of it. They got back in their car and drove off. I looked at the old man. He was looking at me, that same empty, expectant gaze. He hadn't moved. The officer's intervention had done nothing. He was still here, waiting. A wave of defeat washed over me. They were right. What else could be done? I was stuck with him, defeated, frustrated, and just wanting it to be over. I reached into my wallet. I didn't have much cash, but I pulled out a 20. Not a lot, but not a little either. Enough, I hoped, to make him leave for good this time. Maybe enough for a decent meal, a warm place for a night. I walked over to him, held out the bill. Here, I said, my voice flat. Take it, and please just go. His skeletal fingers, surprisingly nimble, plucked the 20 from my hand. For the first time, I saw something flicker in those clouded eyes. A glint, and his lips pulled back into that smile grimace, wider this time. It sent a shiver down my spine. He didn't say a word. He just turned, with that same slow, shuffling gait, and walked away. He didn't look back. He rounded the corner and was gone. I stood there for a long moment, the spot where he'd stood feeling suddenly strangely empty. A profound sense of relief washed through me. Finally, it was over. He was gone. Maybe the 20 was all it took. Maybe he'd finally gotten what he wanted from me. The rest of the day passed in a blur of normalcy. I went to work, focused on my tasks. The constant background hum of anxiety I'd been living with seemed to have faded. I felt lighter. I actually ate a proper dinner that night, slept soundly for the first time in weeks. I woke up the next morning feeling heavy. Not emotionally heavy, physically heavy. My shoulders ached, a deep, burning ache. as if I'd been lifting weights all night. My neck was stiff. I groaned, rolling out of bed. Must have slept funny. I shuffled towards the bathroom, the ache in my shoulders intensifying with each step. Felt like I was carrying something substantial. I stretched, trying to work out the kinks, but the feeling persisted. A dull, crushing pressure centered right between my shoulder blades, radiating outwards. I reached the bathroom, flicked on the light, and looked in the mirror, and I screamed. It wasn't a loud scream, more of a choked, strangled gasp. My blood ran cold, colder than any chilled room in the mortuary. My heart hammered against my ribs, threatening to break free. There, in the mirror, perched on my shoulders, was the old man. He was sitting there, cross-legged, as if my shoulders were the most natural throne in the world. His skeletal legs were hooked around my neck, his hideously thin arms wrapped around my head, his gnarled fingers resting lightly on my temples. He was a dead weight, a grotesque, leering gargoyle, and he was smiling, that same wide, lipless grimace, but this time it was triumphant, knowing. His clouded eyes, reflected in the mirror, stared directly into mine. I whirled around, hands flying up to my shoulders, expecting to feel him, to grab him, to throw him off. Nothing. My hands met only my own skin, my own shirt. There was nothing there. I spun back to the mirror, heart pounding. He was still there, still perched on my shoulders, still smiling that awful smile. I could feel his weight. The crushing pressure was undeniable, real. My muscles were screaming under the strain. My spine felt like it was compressing. But when I touched my shoulders, there was nothing. He existed only in the reflection, and on my aching back. "Get off me!" I yelled, my voice cracking. I thrashed, trying to shake him loose, like a dog trying to rid itself of fleas. I jumped up and down.
Ispunin circles.
Nothing happened. In the mirror, he remained perfectly balanced, his smile unwavering, his eyes fixed on mine. He didn't even sway. Panic, raw and primal, clawed at my throat. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. I splashed cold water on my face. Looked again. Still there. I pinched myself hard. I was awake. This was happening. I tried talking to him, to the reflection. "What do you want? Who are you?" My voice was a desperate whisper. No response. Just that silent, knowing smile. His weight seemed to increase, pressing me down. I stumbled out of the bathroom, avoiding mirrors. But I could still feel him. That terrible, crushing burden. The girl. The young woman who'd carried a weight. Her slumped shoulders. The way her parents described her suffering. It hit me then with the force of a physical blow. This was her weight. This was what she'd been carrying. And somehow that old man, he was it, or he was its conduit. And by giving him money, by engaging with him in that final transaction, I had taken it from him, or he had passed it to me. The relief I'd felt yesterday was a cruel joke. He hadn't just left, he'd transferred. I spent the rest of the day in a daze of terror and disbelief. Every reflective surface became a source of horror. A shop window, a car's side mirror, even the dark screen of my phone. Each time, he was there, perched on my shoulders, that terrible smile fixed on his face. And the weight, God, the weight was unbearable. Who could I tell? The police? They'd thought I was overreacting to a beggar. What would they say to this? They'd lock me up. My colleagues? My friends? They'd think I'd finally cracked under the strain of my job. I remembered the young woman's parents. No one believed her, they'd said. They said it was just a feeling. Now I understood. It wasn't just a feeling. It was real. And now it was mine. I don't know what to do. The weight is always there. And every time I catch my reflection, he's there too, smiling. Waiting. I think he's waiting for me to find someone else to pass this on to. But how? And who would deserve such a fate? I think this is a curse. A curse from that poor girl, or something that clung to her, and now it clings to me. The old man was just the ferryman, and there's no one in the world who will believe me. I'm carrying this alone, just like she did. I used to be the kind of person who could sleep through anything. Thunderstorms, sirens, even my upstairs neighbors' all-night parties. I slept like the dead, but I haven't really slept in almost a month. Not since I started hearing him down there. It started as a faint noise under my bedroom floor. Tap, always one, then two more, then silence. I ignored it for days. Maybe it was the pipes, maybe a rodent. I didn't want to deal with it, but the tapping kept happening, always between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m., without fail. Eventually, I stayed up one night, phone flashlight on, ear to the wood.
Top. Top, top.
Silence. I knocked back. One knock, then two, then three. Nothing. No response. I told myself I was being stupid. I'm not the paranoid type. I'm not even the cautious type, to be honest. I've lived alone for years. I handle myself, or at least I thought I did. One night, I was so exhausted that I passed out early, maybe around 10 p.m. I woke up at 2:17 a.m., freezing. My window was open. I never open it. I live on the ground floor. That's rule number 1. I locked it, sat up, listened.
No taps.
I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. Something was wrong, like the room was holding its breath. Then I heard the whisper. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear, but it was underneath me, right below the floorboards. Help me. That voice was hoarse, weak, definitely human. I jumped out of bed, grabbed the crowbar I keep in the closet. Don't ask why. I used to be a bouncer. Old habits die hard. I pried up 2 floorboards. Just insulation and darkness. Please. Another whisper. Louder. Closer. I yanked more boards up. At this point, I was shaking. Not from fear, I told myself, but from the adrenaline. That's what I thought until I saw the fingernail. It was wedged between 2 floorboards. Old, dirty, broken, blood-caked, human. I fell back. I swear I couldn't move. I stared at that jagged little piece of a person and wondered how long it had been there. I called the cops. They arrived at dawn, asked questions, taped off the place. Told me I'd be contacted later. That night, I stayed at a hotel. I didn't go back for 3 days. When I did, half my floor was gone, replaced with caution tape and a gaping crawl space below. They found him. A man. Not buried, not dead. Just placed there deliberately, bound, gagged, nails driven through his hands and ankles. His mouth was sewn shut with fishing line. He'd been alive barely. They said he was unconscious from blood loss when they pulled him out, but he made it to the hospital. I never saw his face. I got a visit from the detectives last week. They told me something I haven't repeated out loud to anyone. The guy under my floor, he wasn't the victim. He was the kidnapper, and in his bag, which they found beside him, was a camera. Dozens of photographs, mostly of women, sleeping, tied up, bleeding. One of them was me, taken from above, while I slept, from inside my room. But here's the part one haven't told the cops. When I moved in 6 months ago, I noticed something weird. An old, half-nailed floorboard under my dresser. I assumed the landlord had just done a lazy repair job, so I hammered it down. I think I sealed him in, and I think he was watching me that entire time. I haven't gone back, but sometimes at night when I'm in a new place with new locks and fresh drywall, I swear I still hear tapping. 1, then 2, then silence. I thought that was the end of it. A human monster under my floor, caught by pure accident, locked in by me unknowingly. That should have been a satisfying conclusion, some poetic justice. But the cops missed something, or maybe they didn't tell me on purpose. When I went back one final time to collect my stuff, I opened the bedroom door and immediately gagged. The floor was clean, too clean, bleach, thick chemical burn in the air. But I saw it anyway because I knew exactly where to look. The dark streak that had soaked into the floorboards near the dresser. Blood, not a spill, a smear, dragged. It wasn't his. I knelt down, stupidly, and touched the edge of it. My hand came up wet. Not bleach, not blood, something else. It was oil black and thick, almost like it had congealed. My heart froze. The room was quiet again. But now that I was listening, I realized the floor was hollow in more than one spot, like there were sections, compartments. I followed the smear with my crowbar and yanked up a nearby plank. The smell hit me like a hammer. Not just rot, not just decay. Sweetness, rancid sugar, like spoiled meat sealed in plastic left under the sun. The compartment wasn't empty. It was a box, a sealed wooden crate nailed shut from the outside. I clawed it open. Inside was something wrapped in layers of black trash bags, duct taped shut. The plastic peeled back like skin. Underneath, hair, human hair, a whole scalp, long matted, still attached to something. I threw up in my mouth but couldn't stop unwrapping. What I found inside was a head. Just a head. No eyes. The sockets were burnt shut, cauterized, maybe with a lighter. Her lips were sewn with thick black thread. Her neck stump had teeth marks. Human teeth marks. He bit her. I stumbled back, dry heaving. Then I saw what I wish I never saw. Carved into her cheek, with the same fishing line he used on himself, was a word. Next. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't even shower. I just sat on the edge of my hotel bed, trying to convince myself none of it was real. Maybe the cops were wrong. Maybe I was the one going crazy. But at 2:41 a.m., the hotel phone rang. No one calls hotel phones anymore. That alone gave me chills. I picked it up. Nothing. Just static. Then breathing. Then tapping. 1, 2. Silence. I slammed the phone down. I called the front desk, demanding to know who called. They said the line was dead. No incoming calls had come through since midnight. I checked my door. Locked. Deadbolt 2. But the window, open. On the table beside it was a single Polaroid. Me, sleeping, taken from just above me. Angle was low, like someone was crouched near the bed. There was something written on the back in red Sharpie. Still watching. I don't know if he got out. I don't even know if he was ever alone under that floor. Maybe there were more like him. Maybe I just got in the way of something older, something worse. I move every week now. Cash only. I don't tell anyone where I am. I don't use my real name, not even online. I keep a bat beside the bed, a knife under the pillow, and a habit of staying awake until the sun rises. But last night I slipped, just for a second. I blinked, nodded off, and when I woke up, there was a fingernail on my chest, still warm. It was my uncle's housekeeper that informed me he'd gone missing, being that I was the only relative to have kept in contact with him over the years. The others, it seemed, had been consumed by their own busy lives or else were too disturbed by my uncle's eccentricities to visit. Over time, Silas had developed an obsession with collecting objects of spiritual and paranormal interest, amassing such a number of them that he had become something of a hoarder. I'd been the one to employ his housekeeper, Claire, ignoring my uncle's grumbling protests. Nearing his late 70s, he was in need both of help cleaning his home and of company, the benefits of which he came grudgingly to enjoy. He even offered Claire a room in the upper floors of the house, which due to his worsening arthritis he seldom used. And so I was satisfied that if anything were to happen there would at least be an able-bodied person at hand to help him. What I did not expect was to learn from a panicked phone call that my uncle had vanished from the house sometime the previous day and could not be found. I went over at once, thinking it unlikely that he'd gotten far on his bad hip, and certainly not without being noticed. My uncle always dressed in an eccentric fashion, leading him to become something of an icon referred to by the locals as the Wizard of Goad Street. Upon my arrival at the house, I found Claire looking red-eyed and agitated, which was unusual for a woman I'd always found to be reassuringly bland. "I don't have a clue where he went," she said. "I didn't hear any of the doors opening, but I've looked for him all over and I can't see him anywhere. I don't know what he's thinking. He's been acting so strange this past week." "Stranger than usual?" I asked, glancing around the living room. There were new additions to my uncle's trove, including a Victorian lamp and what I took to be a large mirror hung up and covered by a fringed shawl. Peering in its direction, I felt an odd pull towards it, the urge to tug down that sheath of fabric in order to look into the glass beneath. Choosing to ignore it, I said, "What do you mean by strange anyway, Claire?" She turned up her hands in a helpless motion. "He went out in the middle of the night last Thursday to start with. I asked him where he was going, and he said it was some kind of antiques emporium that wouldn't open at any other time. Only after dark, he said. Well, there are places like that now. Night cafes, bookshops. They're opening all over town now. So I said I'd drive him there and parked up outside, waiting for him to come out." Claire's eyes shifted to the mirror, and I realized that it was she that had hidden it, that she could barely stand to have it in the room. I wondered why. Unlike the absent relations, Claire had never been remotely superstitious and had only shaken her head at my uncle's insistence that the alleged histories of his treasures were a reality. "I didn't like the look of the place," said Claire. "It was in a rundown area, and the windows were filthy, but the shop was open and Silas went in. He was gone for about half an hour, and I started wondering if I should go in after him. Then he came out with a package under his arm wrapped up in paper, and when I got out of the car to help him, he wouldn't let me touch it." Claire pulled her cardigan tighter around herself, seeming chilled despite the August heat. "Silas insisted on hanging the mirror himself and spent a good hour just standing there looking at it. I couldn't work out what he was doing, but it gave me the creeps. In the end, I told him to come away from it, and he stared at me as though he'd forgotten I was even there. I asked him what he was doing, and he said he'd been told by one of the salespeople at the shop that the mirror would change him. How exactly, I don't know, but I think he was hoping it would help him with his walking. He's getting on now. Old people have a lot to worry about. So it's a magic mirror. Then," I said, half laughing, "Christ, he really is getting worse, isn't he?" Claire's mouth didn't even twitch. "I couldn't even look at the mirror myself," she said. "Not straight on, anyway. Once your uncle went up to bed, I hid it away and put the receipt in the drawer. I kept thinking I should just take it back. Every day I'd catch Silas pulling that shawl up to look in the glass. Well, it can't have been doing him any good, standing around for so long like that. I noticed him getting stiff, limping about with a sort of hunch. Even his face, it was going all lopsided. I was getting concerned about his health. I was going to call the doctor, but then Silas went missing, so I came to you instead." I cleared a box of miscellaneous junk off a nearby chair and offered it to Claire, noting how pale she'd turned over the course of the conversation. She took it gratefully. "You say you've looked all over the house for him," I said. "Both floors?" "I have. What about the neighbors? They have security cameras. Maybe he was picked up in some of the footage." "Oh, I've already been round and asked. Nothing. I've spoken to the police, but they weren't taking it too seriously. I can't explain it. It's like he's just disappeared, but obviously he can't have done. Can he? I know that." Hearing the distress in Claire's voice, I found a box of tissues on the table and passed it over to her. "It's all right," I said. "He'll turn up. I might try and visit the antique shop, see if I can speak to the owner or whoever works there and see what exactly they told my uncle about the mirror. If there's some ritual they've told him to do, then maybe he's gone out to perform it and gotten lost. Wouldn't be the first time he's wandered off like this." Claire dabbed pitifully at her face with the sodden tissue. "I know. It's just I have this awful feeling. I wish I could just throw that thing away." This directed at the mirror, which, unable to restrain my curiosity, I crossed the room to examine for myself. It wasn't very large, the frame of a black gilt, the glass murky, not with dirt but with the effect of a window looking out into a dark fog. There again was that unpleasant sense of needing to be close to it almost against my will, and before I knew it I was staring into the mirror at my reflection, which had been so warped by the glass that my left eye seemed to have been pulled down my face by an invisible hand. Then Claire was tugging at my shoulder and attempting to shield the mirror with the old shawl once again. "Don't look at it," she said, and couldn't say why, only stared at me, her eyes pleading, defeated. She wouldn't leave my side until I'd left the room, ushered into the study in which the receipts for Silas' collection had been kept for many years. It was the only room he'd insisted on having any particular organization, stating the importance of holding on to every record of purchase in case something was wrong, or went wrong, the necessity of the distinction passing me by. I found the receipt for the mirror in a drawer marked E. Elskin's Emporium had apparently sold the item to my uncle for 3 figures, which I considered shockingly overpriced. There was a phone number on the receipt, which, when tried, wasn't functional, and an address pointing to the outskirts of a nearby village. A thorough internet search found no report of the shop's existence in the area, nor was there any record of the business itself having been registered. There was nothing to be done except visit the Emporium myself during opening hours and hope that Silas turned up in the meantime. I drove into the village that evening, finding the shop at the end of a street populated mainly by shuttered windows, a barber's shop and a nail bar closed for the evening at the far end. Other than that, there was very little nearby but rows of terraced houses and a strip of dreary countryside bisected by the road. Approaching the Emporium, which was as dingy and unwelcoming as Claire had described, I saw that it, too, was closed, only the nearby streetlight illuminating the windows. The furniture within was in boxes or covered with dust sheets, clearly intended to be packed up and taken away, but there were still several mirrors left up on the walls, all with the same unpleasant quality as that which my uncle had taken home with him. There was clearly nobody inside the shop, and likely hadn't been for several days. A voice piped up from behind me, confirming my suspicions. "They've been shut since last week. Not even been there that long, and it seems like they've given up already." A middle-aged woman stood with a baby on her hip at her front doorstep, watching me with interest. "So they're shutting down?" I said. "It's weird that they even set up here to start with. Not as if they've made it easy for them to be found." The woman nodded eagerly. "Exactly what I said. Probably a front for something, money laundering, maybe. They had a fair few customers, mind you, and they all looked the type to be interested in all that esoteric stuff. I had a look in there myself, but it wasn't for me. The staff were a bit odd as well, very overkeen. Seemed desperate to be rid of everything." I looked into the shop again, furrowing my brow. "Esoteric," the woman had said, but I began to notice symbols and wicked little faces on the spines of books and carved into the woodwork of chairs, and knew that what the clients sought was magic. Though I myself didn't believe in it, I saw clearly where my uncle's recent behavior had sprung from. "Did you ever see the owner at all?" I asked. "I've been wanting to talk to him, but it's like he doesn't exist." At this, the woman took on the same look I'd seen on Claire's face, and the baby began to fuss, picking up on the change in her mood. "Me and my daughter both saw him," said the woman. "The owner. Early Friday morning while it was still dark. We were up with the baby, having a cup of tea, when my daughter said, 'Who's that?' and pointed out of the window over there." At this, the woman gestured to the street, her finger tracing up and down as though following the movements of an unseen figure. "There was a man heading up to the door, only he wasn't walking, more going along on his hands with his legs dragging behind him. I thought, well, maybe he's been in an accident or something. I was going to help him get into the shop. I saw he had the keys in his pocket and realized he must be locking up. My daughter stopped me from going out. 'There's something wrong with him,' she said. 'Something doesn't feel right.' So we stood and watched him, and I could see what she meant by it. It's like his body wasn't properly human, and he was just trying to pass it off that way, like putting an animal in a costume. His arms were turned round wrong. His legs twisted into each other and held up off the ground like the back end of a beetle. and the way he moved, it was like it hurt, but he was quick. Must have been used to it. When he got to the door, I couldn't think how he'd get the key in the lock, but he just reared up against the wall, twitching about. Then he must have realized we were watching because suddenly he turned to look round over his shoulder, and his face. The woman made a twisting gesture with her hand I couldn't distinguish and shrugged her shoulders. "I can't describe it," she said. "My daughter couldn't either when we were talking about it afterwards. It was just horrible. I was glad I'd not gone out in the end. I just have a feeling something would have happened. I don't know what." She shifted the baby to the other hip, jiggling it up and down to soothe it. "I'd leave all this," she said to me. "Don't go looking for that man. Just leave him alone. Don't buy any of his stuff either. Like I said, I have no idea what he was up to, but I wouldn't want to be involved." I sighed, realizing I'd arrived at another dead end. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. "Doesn't look like the shop will reopen again, anyway." I made a move to return to my car. Only the woman stopped me, her expression softer, maternal. "I hope you don't mind me asking, love," she said, "but have you recently had a stroke?" I burst out laughing, too surprised to be immediately insulted. True, I wasn't the most good-looking man, but I certainly wasn't ugly enough to have ever anticipated receiving that type of remark. "I wasn't trying to be rude," said the woman hastily, clearly embarrassed. "It's just my husband had one a few years ago, and I just thought, never mind. Sorry if I've caused offense." She scurried back into the house, but I saw her again at the front window, watching me as I drove away, her face almost touching the glass. Upon returning to my uncle's home, I went to the mirror again and lingered before it for some time, lost in thought. The mysteries I'd failed to solve had nipped at me endlessly since leaving the village, yet all thoughts left me then but the mirror and the strange, warped quality of the glass, which had apparently called people like my uncle to pay great amounts in order to possess it. I only stepped away from the mirror upon hearing Claire enter the room, throwing the shawl back down with the clumsy velocity of a child caught in some misdeed. "Adrian," said Claire, and at once I was alert to a hysteria in her, held at bay by considerable restraint. "I think I've heard your uncle somewhere in the house." Relief came to me in such a rush that I felt almost ill. "Well, thank God for that," I said. "Where is he?" "In one of the studies, I think. He must have been hiding on purpose for me not to have seen him, but I don't know. I've not dared open the door." "What?" I said. "Why not?" Claire's eyes flicked across my face, then away again, unable to settle. "Just come with me," she said, her tone odd. "If he's hurt, I'll need help to lift him." I followed, thinking that my uncle's mind had gone, or that his joints had given way at last. Claire showed me into the study, lit only by a desk lamp that cast a greenish light across the room. I saw the objects littering the ornate desk in the right-hand corner had been knocked on their sides or off the surface entirely by the force of something crawling rapidly beneath. That something was still there. I could smell a body unwashed, dirty clothes, and another scent I couldn't identify but that I felt I knew. "Uncle," I said, bending down slightly. "Are you there?" "It's Adrian." I heard the shuffling of fabric dragged against floorboards, the mumbling of what I took to be my name. Then a head protruded from the shadows under the desk, and as I stooped down level with it, I saw my uncle as he now was. I thought of the woman I'd met in the street, the bizarre wrenching gesture of her hand in the air. That was how my uncle appeared, his jaws having been wrenched to an upright angle, yellow teeth cutting through the thin epidermis of his cheek, his limbs suffering an inexplicable torsion and near impossible to use. His eyes had been crushed in the pinched pricks of his sockets, blinding him completely. There was nothing in that inner gloom but fluid and the remnants of what strands had held the organs in. I would have thought Silas to have been struck by a car had I not known he'd never left the house, that this change had come about from within. "It's that mirror," said Claire at a near scream. "He stared at it for so long that it did this to him." "It can't have been the mirror," I said faintly. I looked at it as well and nothing's happened to me. But then I saw that Claire had frightened tears in her averted eyes, and an urgency to see myself took over me. At a run, I went to look at the mirror over the bathroom sink, my fingers scratching about for the light. Then I saw my face and turned away, appalled, holding the wreck of it in my hands. Every feature had been reshaped, deformed as though a fishhook had been caught in each and yanked in the direction of the rod. I realized then that the woman in the street had tried to help me, and why the crooked man that she had seen had left the shop abandoned, fleeing the customers that would come after him, wanting his work undone. Finding bandages in the bathroom cupboard, I bound my face with them, unable to bear the sight of it or the thought that I might be seen by others. I sent Claire on leave to her sister's for the week and locked myself into my uncle's house to search his many books on the occult for some way to undo the curse that had stricken us. Online sources I disregarded entirely, being that I suspected the majority would have been written by aspiring authors or fantasists convinced of their inexistent magical prowess. I cared for Silas as well as I could in this time, but I accepted that if I was unable to help him within the next few days, he was likely to die. Food unable to pass down the buckled cartilage of his throat. From the slow process of working through my uncle's library, I gained a vague understanding of the rules of the mirror's curse. That the Emporium insisted on operating through such unusual hours implied that it must be sold in person and by night for its effects on the item's previous owner to be reversed. Yet whether the curse had, in fact, been lifted from the store owner or not, I did not know, and had no way of finding out. That was no way without selling the glass myself under the same circumstances. But being that my uncle was its official owner, I was uncertain if trading it on his behalf would much improve our circumstances. Silas was in no fit state to attempt the sale himself. Though he seemed responsive to all I said to him, he was in too much pain to clearly speak or move more than a few labored feet. Realizing how few options were left to me, I created an online store listing for the mirror using a passably similar stock photograph, offering it at a mid-range price and for collection only. It was some days before a buyer latched on and made the purchase, yet before 2 hours had passed, an attack of guilt took over me and I hastily refunded the order. It occurred to me that my conscience would be lighter if I ensured the sale of the mirror was to someone worthy of disfigurement rather than an innocent stranger. However, being that I'd aided many so-called bad people in my work as a lawyer, I couldn't bring myself to justify the act. In hindsight, perhaps I should have thrown my scruples to the wind and been done with it all. But by then my mind had wandered to other possibilities surrounding the mirror and its purpose. The store owner had gone through overly complex measures to part with it, ones that would take far more time and effort than would readily be available to a desperate man. The greater likelihood was that each of the items I'd seen through the greasy window of the Emporium had contained the same evil, and had been sold for evil's sake. What other reason would the man have to torment others into his own image than bitterness? After all, in writing, I'm no closer to knowing which of my theories was correct, or if there was another yet that I had not thought of. In the days counting down to my uncle's end, the impossibility of our situation lay over me, and when one night I stood up, raw-eyed with lack of sleep from my research, I decided that the mirror had to go. Whatever bad luck came of its disposal could not be any worse than what I'd suffered, I thought. Besides, there were several articles that suggested the breaking and disposing of cursed glass was the safest course of action, and I chose to take their word for it. I was only to throw salt over my shoulder, spin 3 times counterclockwise, or dash the ruined shards into running water afterwards to avoid the 7-year ill tidings. There were more rules to this barely tapped into world of magic than I ever cared to learn. I didn't warn my uncle as to what I was about to do, thinking that it would only distress him, being that he couldn't prevent me even if he disagreed with my plan. Entering the living room, I picked up one of the chairs stacked around the cluttered table and gingerly approached the covered glass, feeling as I now always did a black pressure emanating from it. I left the shawl where it was, thinking, perhaps irrationally, that if the mirror saw me it would try, in some way, to prevent me from attacking it. So as I raised the chair above my head, I did not see the thing break, only heard the crash as my weapon collided with it and the ringing of all its little dead pieces along the floor. As they did so, a scream tore across the house. and for an awful moment I was convinced that it was the glass. Only when I noted the direction of that cry did I realize who it was and ran for the study, stopping just short at the sight of blood weeping along the floor. I had no choice but to step through it as I opened the study door, realizing at once the scale of my mistake. Silas' body had turned over and over itself in rings of bulging flesh, reminding me of a series of images I'd once come across of a factory worker caught and twisted to death in the axis of a machine. My uncle's organs had been thrust out through the mouth by force, and as one last twitch shuddered through him, I understood that he had lived to the end of it. The curse had allowed him that, I saw, a spiteful burst of strength. Only as my shock lost its grip on me did I feel the blood on my own face leaking through the bandages. Felt as I raised my shaking hands to touch them how my features had changed. I was too afraid to take the coverings off and look at myself, and still am. In fact, I do not know if I can ever bear to look at myself again. I don't mean they'd leave for a party or a night out. No, they'd vanish. Gone without a trace by sunset, leaving me alone in the house. I'd search for them, call their names, but they were always gone, like they'd never existed. It wasn't something we ever talked about. The next morning, they'd be back, acting as if nothing had happened, like it was just another night. But it wasn't. I knew that. I learned that the hard way. It all started when I was 6 years old. I remember that first Halloween like it was yesterday. I was dressed as a witch, excited to go trick-or-treating. But just as the sun dipped below the horizon, I noticed the house felt different. Cold, quiet, too quiet. I ran through the halls, calling for my mom and dad, but no one answered. Panic set in. I thought maybe they were hiding, playing a prank, but after what felt like hours of searching, I realized they were gone. The front door was locked, the windows were shut, and I was completely alone. That's when I found the first note. It was on the kitchen table, written in my mom's familiar handwriting. It simply said, "Rule 1, stay in your room. Do not come out until sunrise. Whatever you hear, ignore it." I didn't understand then. I was scared, confused, and alone. I didn't want to stay in my room. I wanted to find my parents, but something about the note made me follow the instructions. I took a flashlight and a pillow, locked myself in my room, and crawled under the covers. I thought maybe it was some kind of weird game. I wasn't sure. That night, I didn't sleep much. The house creaked and groaned, more than usual. I heard strange noises, soft scratching at my door, footsteps in the hallway, whispers that I couldn't quite make out. I told myself it was the wind or my imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something was in the house with me. The next morning, when I opened my door, my parents were back. They were sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. I asked them where they'd gone, what had happened, but they just smiled and said I must have had a bad dream. That was the beginning. Every Halloween after that was the same. My parents would disappear just before nightfall, leaving me alone with a note. Each year, the instructions got a little more specific, a little more ominous. By the time I was 8, the notes included things like, Rule 2, don't look out the windows, and Rule 3, don't respond if someone calls your name. And the noises, they got worse. One year, when I was 9, the sounds outside my room became unbearable. There were knocks on the door, not gentle, but loud, insistent pounding. I pressed my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, but I couldn't block it out. The voice on the other side was familiar. My mother's voice, calling my name. "Ellie, it's okay. You can come out now." She sounded so calm, so normal. For a second, I almost believed it was really her. But the rule had been clear. Do not open the door, no matter what you hear. So I didn't. I stayed under the covers, trembling, until the knocking stopped. I never told my parents about the voice, and they never asked. The years passed, and the game continued. It became a twisted Halloween tradition. While other kids dressed up and collected candy, I stayed locked in my room, listening to the house come alive with things I couldn't see. I became used to the notes, the strange noises, and the feeling of being watched. It was all part of the game, my own haunted ritual. But when I turned 13, everything changed. That year, the note was different. I found it on my bed just as the sun was setting. But instead of the usual instructions, it said, Rule 4, there's something new in the house tonight. Be careful. I didn't know what that meant, but the moment I read it, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something new? What did that mean? I locked my door, as usual, and tried to settle in for the night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The noises started earlier than usual. At first, it was the familiar creaks and footsteps. I'd gotten used to those, but then there was something else, breathing. I could hear it, low and heavy, just outside my door. It wasn't human. It was too slow, too deep. I pressed myself against the headboard, clutching my flashlight like a weapon. Even though I knew it wouldn't help, the breathing moved away after a while, but then came the scratching. It wasn't at my door this time. It was coming from inside my room. I whipped the flashlight around, scanning the walls, the ceiling, but there was nothing. The scratching grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was coming from beneath my bed. My heart pounded in my chest, my throat dry with fear. I didn't dare look under the bed. I was too scared of what I might find. The scratching stopped abruptly, replaced by a soft, childlike giggle. The sound of it froze the blood in my veins. It wasn't me. It wasn't my parents. Something was in the room with me. I backed up against the wall, holding the flashlight out in front of me like it could protect me from whatever was there. The giggling continued, soft and mocking. I whispered to myself, "It's not real. It's just a game." But I didn't believe it anymore. Suddenly, there was a loud bang on the door. The whole room seemed to shake with the force of it. I dropped the flashlight, plunging myself into darkness. The breathing was back, but this time, it was right outside my door. Bang! Another hit. The door shuddered. Bang! The lock rattled. Whatever was out there was trying to get in. I scrambled to pick up the flashlight, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The banging grew more violent, each hit sounding like the door was about to give in. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence.
Pure, deafening silence.
I held my breath, waiting, listening for any sign of movement. Then, the voice returned, soft and sweet, like honey. "Ellie, it's okay. You can come out now." It was my mother's voice again, but this time, I knew it wasn't her. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just sat there, frozen in fear, praying for the night to end. The voice called out again, more insistent this time. "Ellie, don't be scared. It's just a game." My hands were trembling, and I could barely hold onto the flashlight. The voice kept calling, but I stayed silent. I knew the rules. I knew I couldn't open the door. But then, something strange happened. The door, it began to unlock. I heard the soft click of the lock turning, and the handle slowly twisted. "No," I whispered, pressing myself further against the wall, willing the door to stay shut. But it was too late. The door creaked open, just a crack, but enough for me to see a shadow in the hallway. Something tall and thin, its limbs too long, its fingers clawed. It wasn't my mother. The creature stood in the doorway, unmoving, watching me. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see its face. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt like I might pass out. And then, just as it stepped forward, the first rays of sunlight crept through the window. The creature recoiled, hissing like an animal, and within seconds, it was gone. The door slammed shut, and the house was quiet again. I didn't leave my room until the sun was fully up. When I finally opened the door, the house was just as it had been the night before. Silent, empty, as if nothing had happened. My parents were back, sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee like they always did. I stumbled in, shaken and pale, and told them everything. The creature, the scratching, the voice that wasn't my mother's. They just looked at me, exchanged glances, and then my dad laughed softly. "You must have had a bad dream," he said, shaking his head. "Nothing like that happened, Ellie. It was just your imagination." My mom smiled that same strange smile and added, "You're safe now. It's over." But I knew better. I knew it wasn't just a dream. The fear, the things I'd heard and seen, they were real. They had to be. My parents didn't believe me, they never did. And that was the most terrifying part. Now, as an adult with children of my own, I know the truth. Whatever haunted me in that house, whatever played that sick game, it's still out there, waiting. And it's hungry. I fear for the lives of my children. I'll never let them go through what I went through. I'll protect them at all costs, even if it means never celebrating Halloween, never letting the night touch them the way it touched me. Because I know, deep down, that it's only a matter of time before the game starts again. Halloween is coming. They say some funny things about Kersal Moor, and when I say funny, what I really mean is odd. If they ever made me laugh, they don't anymore. There was a time when the moors ran all the way to the river, but that was long ago. These days, all that remains is a wild scrap of land by St. Paul's Church. On that sad little heath, footpaths cross the sandy hills, which are dotted with gorse and Scotch broom. Everyone in a 2-mile radius knows that the moors were haunted once. Fewer know that they still are. They think the ghosts must have vanished by now, fading away as the moors got smaller. The truth is, they're still around. This is the story of how I met them. When I was young, Grandpa had an awful-smelling dog called Dindins, which he used to walk down Moor Lane. From time to time, I'd tag along, mostly to listen to his stories, but also to watch him smoke. Everyone smoked back then, but Grandpa rolled his own, which wasn't as common. He used to pinch the tobacco in a Rizla and lick the edge to seal it. Sometimes he let me do it for him, but I was sworn to secrecy on that point. I used to like it when a speck of tobacco stuck to my tongue because it gave my mouth a dangerous little buzz of nicotine. One day, just by St. Paul's, Dindin stopped and gazed across the moor. He shook himself and whimpered. Does he want to come off his lead? I wondered. Grandpa shook his head. Not here, he said. That's not yearning, lad. It's fear. What of? Ghosts. Moors full of 'em. I looked at him in alarm. Don't be daft, I begged. I'm not. Have you finished that cigarette? What? Oh, I licked the paper, pressed it down and handed it over. He lit the end and grunted with satisfaction. There's a special time of year coming up, he told me, resuming his story through a cloud of smoke, called the winter solstice. Longest night of the year. When it falls on a new moon, it's the darkest night there is. The two worlds are very close then. Two worlds. One of the living, he clarified, and one of the dead. He turned to the dreary heath that lay beside the road. If you come to Kersal Moor, he added, on that one special night, you can see the ghosts with your own 2 eyes. They call you to join 'em with a song. Oh, unless you are a vicar/hell will have your soul for sure/ the devil's quick, but we were quicker/ now we hide on Kersal Moor. I shuddered. I don't think I'd like that, I said. He seemed surprised. Really? Well, you don't go to join him straight away, he explained. It's like a deal you make for later. When the sun rises, you go home and live your life as normal. You just don't have to worry about hell anymore. Instead, when you die, you join him on the moor instead of taking your chances with, up or down. When does it happen? Which bit? I tried to remember the rules. A new moon on the longest night, I recalled. He shrugged and smoked his cigarette. God knows, he said at last. It happened in 1957, I know that much.
Kumaon, Dindins.
He gave the lead a little tug and we continued down Moor Lane. Grandpa was a big man. I've been told he was 6'4", but to me he was more like the Colossus of Rhodes. He wasn't made of bronze, like the original, but heaps of hard muscle, wrapped in layers of thick winter fabric. He was always kind to me, but I later learned that he'd mellowed in his old age. Eventually, Dad told me a few things about his own childhood, and some of them were hard to hear. Back in the 50s, Grandpa drank spirits in the day and sometimes beat his children. He even beat his wife when she tried to intervene. I never met Grandma because she bailed on the marriage, running away in the middle of the night. No note, nothing. No one had heard from her since, and I know that hurt my father very badly. He was only 10 at the time and used to drive himself mad, trying to work out what he'd done to let her down or disappoint her. After doing her best to protect him, she'd simply walked away with no explanation. Apparently, once it became clear that she wasn't coming back, Grandpa had sworn off the booze entirely and slowly rebuilt his relationship with his children. It's hard to reconcile these facts with my own memories of Grandpa. The man I knew was a gentle giant with a wry sense of humor. When he smiled, his mouth barely moved but his eyes sparkled, like two bright coins on a crumpled chamois leather. I couldn't imagine him ever getting drunk, let alone violent. In the morning, he smelled of coal tar soap and aniseed toothpaste, and at night he smelled of old Holben. Even today, these are smells that make me feel safe. I thought he'd be around forever, but he was an old man, of course, and how could he be? One day, when I came home from school, it was clear that something bad had happened. Mom and Dad were talking in low voices. When I entered the hall, they retreated further into the kitchen, quietly closing the door. At last, Dad emerged. "Do you want to knock on Grandpa's door?" he said, trying to make it sound like a bit of a game. "And walk the dog yourself tonight?" It wasn't Grandpa who answered the door, but Auntie Jill. From that point on, it was my job to walk din-dins, and I did it alone. I don't know what happened to Grandpa, whether he'd had a fall or whatever, but I don't think I saw him standing after that. He always seemed to be sitting in a chair, shrinking in on himself. When autumn came, he was moved to a nursing home. It wasn't long before Dad took me to visit. The lobby smelled of gravy granules and disinfectant. There was a communal hall with pretend carpet laid down in squares, and the armchairs were like the ones in a hospital. There was something about it that made me uneasy, so I held back nervously. "Come on," said Dad impatiently. We found Grandpa watching snooker with the sound turned down. Dad verbally reminded him of all the nice things he got at the nursing home, like fish on Friday, roast beef Sunday. They'd watched a tape of Brief Encounter. There was even a chess set by one of the windows, though one of the pawns was a cork stood on end. "It's not bad, is it?" said Dad. "I mean, all things considered, it's not too bad." Grandpa smiled, but not with his eyes. "It's not too bad," he agreed. When we got back in the car, we sat there quietly for a moment. "Grandpa's not all right," I said at last. Dad looked at me in the rear-view mirror. "What do you mean, not all right?" he said in alarm. He was smiling, wasn't he? Well, yeah, but not properly. I didn't have to worry about Grandpa for long. On the 9th of December, when the first specks of snow were swirling in the air, he went to sleep and never woke up. He was laid to rest in St. Paul's Cemetery, on the edge of Kersal Moor. Din-Dins died a week after that. 4 years later, it was 1995 and I was 16. The winter solstice fell on the 22nd of December that year. I kept looking at the moon in the nights leading up to it. Over the course of a week and a half, it slowly waned to a cold, sharp curve. On the 21st of the month, it vanished altogether. I went to Moor Lane and found the path by St. Paul's Church. It led from the road into utter darkness. I walked down it, beginning to stumble as I left the familiar glow of the orange street light. On the moor itself, there were humps of long grass to trip me up and patches of grit where the soil had worn away. Eventually, I found my way to the highest part of the moor and stood there in triumph, looking all around me. As dark as it was, the horizon was jeweled with city lights, especially when I looked south-southeast towards Manchester. "Hello," I called. Nothing came back from the darkness. All I could hear was the sound of cars on Moore Lane. As I waited, they became less frequent and eventually stopped. "Hello," I called repeatedly. Just as I was about to give up and go home, I heard it, soft and tuneless, like a faraway football chant. "Oh, unless you are a vicar, hell will have your soul for sure." My heart quickened. It was so faint I cupped my ears and held my breath to listen. I resisted the urge to shift my weight in case it made the grass rustle underfoot. "Oh, unless you are a vicar, hell will have your soul for sure." The devil's quick, but we were quicker. Now we hide on Kersal Moor. I looked in the direction where it seemed loudest. I wasn't sure if my eyes were playing tricks on me, but I suddenly thought I could see the ghosts. I wasn't scared because it felt like a dream. "This is real," I kept telling myself, but I couldn't make it stick. The song continued.
Via veritas et vita,
Says the guard on heaven's door. But no one has to face St. Peter if they hide on Kersal Moor. They shuffled towards me as they sang, making their way up the long, dark slope. As they came closer, I no longer had to concentrate to hear them. Their voices made me shiver in the night. Butcher, baker, barrel maker, hunter, hatter, even whore. No one has to meet his maker. In the dark of Kersal Moor. By the time they finished singing, I could see them quite clearly. They had long, hungry faces with sunken cheeks and hollow eyes. Their features had no color, as far as I could see, or even substance to speak of. It was like they were etched on the dark in faint gray glimmers. "Gather round," cried a voice in the dark. "Gather round." One by one, they joined me on the dark summit. In that eerie crowd, Lord and leper stood shoulder to shoulder as equals. I thought I could make out their clothes, or maybe just the memories of clothes, conjured out of nothing. A greatcoat here and a flat cap there, knitted from the threads of the night itself. "Silence!" called the ringleader. I turned to look at him and started with surprise. His neck had been cleanly severed. He carried his head like a football, holding it aloft to project his voice. "Do you fear the hereafter?" he began. "Have you been a sinner? Are you willing to face God and the devil and risk your immortal soul?" I don't know," I said honestly. A murmur of concern rose from the crowd. Their leader looked disapprovingly down at me, then stamped his foot for silence. "Swear the oath instead," he urged. "Take the pledge. Promise to join us when you die. Spend eternity here, on the moor." The ghosts began to sing again. This time, the chorus had a more urgent quality. It was almost a touch of menace. I scanned their faces in wonder, looking for signs that they were happy with their chosen afterlife. I couldn't see any, just a nagging kind of hunger and a deep yearning for something lost. Then I saw him, a familiar face like chamois leather, looming over those of his neighbors. He hadn't changed at all, or rather, he'd only grown fainter. He was singing with the rest of them, and when he saw that I'd spotted him, he nodded in encouragement and smiled, but not with his eyes. "Grandpa," I said in surprise, but he melted back into darkness, singing as he went. I turned my attention to the ringleader. He lowered his head until the pale face was level with mine. "Swear," he bellowed. His breath was a rush of cold air, like a bitter wind blasting my face. As I staggered backwards, my dreamy fascination turned to alarm. I'd seen and heard enough, but when I looked behind me, I saw no escape route. I was surrounded on all sides by ghosts. "Swear, swear," they chanted. They began to close in on me. As they did, I span helplessly on the spot, then turned skyward in desperation. Nothing could be seen. No stars, no clouds, nothing. Not even the faint gray glow of light pollution. There was nothing left in the world but me, the ghosts and perfect darkness. "Swear!" they screamed in chorus. "I don't want to," I begged. I covered my ears and sank to the ground. A howl of disappointment went up around me, ringing in my ears. The story ends exactly where I left it. I must have passed out or maybe woke up, because the next thing I knew it was morning. The long brown grass was wet with dew. The silver sun was creeping up the sky. The ghosts were gone from Kersal Moor. I'm 40 now. People tell me I look older. I wouldn't say I believe in ghosts, exactly, because I waited a long time on the moor that night. Maybe I just fell asleep and had a nightmare. I don't think I did, but it's certainly possible. The next winter solstice to fall on a new moon was the one at the end of 2003. I don't mind saying I was too scared to leave the house that night. I just sat in the kitchen with a six-pack of beer, praying that I wouldn't hear them singing from the nearby moor. It happened again in 2014, but I'd moved to Bristol by then and didn't feel as threatened. The words of the song were, "Oh, unless you are a vicar, hell will have your soul for sure. The devil's quick, but we were quicker. Now we hide on Kersal Moor. Via veritas et vita, says the guard on heaven's door. But no one has to face St. Peter if they hide on Kersal Moor. Butcher, baker, barrel maker, hunter, hatter, even whore. No one has to meet his maker in the dark of Kersal Moor. Tell me, have you been a sinner? There's a loophole in the law. Meet us where the veil is thinner, in the dark of Kersal Moor. The next winter solstice with a new moon will be on December 21st, 2025. When it happens, I know I'll be far from Kersal Moor. I hope you'll follow my example. In any case, I try not to think about it. If it was real, then Grandpa must be stuck on the moor forever. I know it's not good there. He was singing and smiling with the rest of them, but I could see it in his eyes. He's not all right, and when I remember his face, I can't help but wonder. Why did he say yes? Why did he take the pledge? What had he done in his life to be so scared of God's judgment? I mean, don't get me wrong. I know he used to drink and beat my father, but didn't he make amends? Why did he choose eternity on Kersal Moor rather than taking his chances with heaven and hell? And then I always think, what really happened to Grandma? The truck wheezed its last breath somewhere between nowhere and hell. Lena watched the gauge drop to E with the same detachment she'd felt watching leaves fall from dying trees. Inevitable, meaningless, just another thing ending. She'd lost count of the days since they'd fled the observation camp. Could have been a week, could have been a month. Time got slippery when you stopped caring about tomorrow. David killed the engine before it could seize completely. In the sudden quiet, they could hear the wind moving through whatever this place used to be. A rest stop, maybe. Hard to tell with the bloom growing over everything like bad memories. That's it then, David said. His voice had gone raspy since Luke. Everything about him had gone raspy. His movements, his breathing, even the way he looked at things. Like he was seeing through them to some terrible truth on the other side. Marcus hadn't spoken in hours. He sat in the truck bed among their dwindling supplies, knees drawn up, staring at nothing. The observation camp had carved something out of him, left spaces where normal used to live. Lena climbed out first, her legs protesting after hours of stillness. The bare-painted music box knocked against her hip where she'd tied it to her belt. She'd started doing that, keeping it close, always within reach. Sometimes she caught herself running her fingers over the painted bears without meaning to. The landscape stretched out gray and wrong in every direction. Not the aggressive wrongness of deep bloom territory, just the tired wrongness of a world giving up. Scrub grass fought through cracks in the asphalt. A road sign, green paint flaking, pointed toward towns that probably didn't exist anymore. "We need to decide," David said, joining her. He'd lost weight they couldn't spare, his clothes hanging loose like they belonged to someone else, someone who hadn't watched his son disappear into static and screaming. "Already decided," Lena heard herself say. The words came from somewhere deeper than thought, pulled up from the same place that made her fingers seek the music box. David studied her face. VRI. Not a question. He'd felt it too, then. The pull. Like gravity, but sideways. Like something calling without sound. That's Bloom Central, Marcus said from the truck. First words in forever, and they came out cracked. That's where it started. Where it's strongest. I know. Lena didn't elaborate. Couldn't explain the certainty that had been growing since they'd left the fence behind. VRI. The name sat in her mind like a stone in water, everything else flowing around it. David rubbed his face, the gesture making him look older than his years. Could be answers there, about the wall, about what really happened. But that wasn't why they were going. They all knew it. The truth was simpler and worse. They had nowhere else to go. The outside world had shown them its teeth. Observation camps and men with clipboards who sorted the living like mail. At least the Bloom was honest about wanting to eat you. They salvaged what they could carry. 2 rifles with not enough ammunition. Water bottles they'd fill at streams if they found any clean ones. Food that would last maybe 3 days if they were careful. Marcus strapped on a pack that looked heavier than he did. How far? He asked. Lena tried to remember maps from before, when distance meant something. Week on foot, maybe less. If they hurried, if nothing killed them, if the pull she felt was real and not just madness dressed up as purpose. They started walking as the sun slipped toward evening. 3 broken people heading toward the heart of the end of the world. Behind them, the truck sat empty on the cracked asphalt, already looking like it had been there forever. The first hollow beast found them on the second day. Lena heard it before she saw it. A sound like crying that wasn't quite right, like something had learned the shape of grief but not its meaning. Through the morning mist, a dog emerged, or what used to be a dog. Its fur had split along the spine, pale growths pushing through like mushrooms after rain. They pulsed faintly, a rhythm that didn't match any heartbeat. "Don't move," David whispered, rifle already up. But the thing had friends. They came from the fog on all sides, a pack moving with the kind of coordination that made Lena's skin crawl. One of them opened its mouth and a child's voice came out. "Mama? Where are you, Mama?" Marcus made a sound like he'd been punched. The observation camp had been full of children. The pack circled closer. Their eyes caught the light wrong, reflecting it back in colors that shouldn't exist. The crying sound came from all of them now, a chorus of stolen sorrow. David fired first. The crack of the rifle seemed small against the vastness of the ruined world. His target stumbled but didn't fall, black fluid leaking from the wound. It laughed, a human laugh from a dog's throat. Then they all came at once. Lena shot until her rifle clicked empty. Marcus swung his pack like a club. David cursed steadily, mechanically as he fired and fired. The things were fast and wrong and wouldn't die like they should. One got its teeth into Marcus's leg before Lena could cave its skull in with her rifle butt. Another knocked David flat, and for a moment Lena thought that was it. That was how their story ended. Torn apart by things that cried with children's voices. But the pack suddenly stopped, heads turning as one toward something in the distance. They made a sound like whispering, all of them together, then melted back into the fog as quickly as they'd come. The fuck was that about? David gasped, pulling himself up. Lena helped Marcus sit, examining the bite. Deep but not arterial. Something bigger coming, maybe. Something they didn't want to share us with. She was right. An hour later, they heard it. A roar that shook the ground and made their teeth ache. Trees swayed without wind. Birds that weren't really birds anymore took flight in panicked clouds. They ran. No discussion, no plan, just the animal certainty that staying meant dying. The thing behind them moved through the forest like a landslide, trees cracking as it passed. Lena caught a glimpse of it through the gaps, massive, bear-shaped but wrong. Its fur alive with phosphorescent fungi that turned its every movement into a light show. Could have caught them, should have caught them, but after a few minutes of pursuit, it veered away, that terrible roar shifting to something almost like singing. Lena thought she understood. They were heading toward VRI, toward the heart of things. The bloom didn't need to hunt them. They were delivering themselves. The landscape changed as they traveled. Subtle at first, colors that seemed shifted a few degrees, shadows that fell at angles that hurt to think about. Then more obvious, plants that moved without wind, flowers that tracked their passage like eyes. The air itself grew thick, full of drifting spores that caught the light like snow falling upward. Marcus developed a cough on the fourth day, wet, rattling, the kind that brought up things better left inside. He didn't complain, just kept walking. But Lena saw how he had to stop more often, how his breathing went shallow when he thought no one was looking. David's paranoia grew with each mile. He saw threats in every shadow, heard pursuit in every sound. Maybe he was right. The forest around them had gone strange in ways that made normal words useless. Trees wept a dark sap that moved with purpose. Vines reached for them with vegetable cunning. The ground sometimes rippled like water, solid only when they were looking directly at it. "This is what it wanted," David said one night, staring into their small fire. They'd given up on concealment. Everything here already knew where they were. The bloom, this is what it was always trying to make. A world that fits it better than us. Lena cleaned the bare-painted music box with a scrap of cloth. The simple human craft of it seemed impossibly precious here, where everything was becoming something else. Maybe it's not trying. Maybe it just is. Whose side are you on? The question came out sharp, accusatory. Nobody's. She wound the key, let a few notes play before stopping it. There aren't sides anymore, just what is and what isn't. Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. And what are we? Still deciding. By the time they saw VRI rising from the corrupted landscape, they were different people than the ones who'd left the truck behind. Leaner, harder, worn down to essential parts. Marcus's cough had gotten worse. David jumped at shadows that were probably there. And Lena felt the pull like a fishhook in her chest, drawing her toward the pulsing mass that had once been a building. VRI looked like a god's tumor. The clean lines of human architecture were still visible underneath, but the bloom had built its own structure on top, a writhing mass of organic growth that hurt to look at directly. Things moved in the substance of it. Shapes that might have been faces, might have been nightmares, might have been both.
Jesus, David Breated.
"He's not here," Lena said, echoing words from a different life. "Hasn't been for a long time." The approach was littered with military equipment fused into the landscape. Tanks whose armor had become garden plots for impossible flowers. Helicopters wrapped in vines that pulsed with their own light. And everywhere, the signs of violence transformed into something else. Blast craters full of growth that spiraled up like frozen screams. Defensive positions marked by soldier-shaped gardens of flesh and fungus. "They tried to stop it," Marcus said between coughs. "Early on, tried to burn it out. Just gave it more to work with," David observed. They made camp in the ruins of what might have been a checkpoint, far enough from VRI to feel like they could breathe, but close enough to feel its attention like weight. Tomorrow they would go in. Tonight they would pretend they still had choices. Lena sat apart from the others, the music box in her lap. The painted bears seemed to move in the flickering light, dancing, running, playing in forests that had never known the bloom. She wound the key and let it play, the simple melody threading through the alien night. Something answered from the darkness. Not quite song, not quite speech, but something that made the music box vibrate in harmony. Lena didn't look up, didn't want to see what had come to listen. Some recognitions were too much to bear. "You came back," a voice said, not out loud but inside, the way thoughts happened. Almost familiar, almost Maya. "Said I'd find you," Lena whispered to the dark. "And now I don't know what I found." The presence withdrew, but not far. Never far. It had been with them the whole journey, Lena realized. Watching, waiting, growing stronger as they approached its birthplace. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow we finish this. But finish had different meanings now, in a world where death was just another kind of change. Morning came sick and yellow through the spore-thick air. Marcus woke himself coughing, specks of something that wasn't quite blood on his sleeve. David hadn't slept. Lena could tell by the way he moved, too quick, too careful, like the world might break if he trusted it. "This is stupid," David said, checking his rifle for the 10th time. "Walking in there. Might as well tie ourselves up with bows. Save them the trouble." "You can stay," Lena said, knowing he wouldn't. "Yeah? And do what?" "Set up housekeeping in mushroom hell." He spat to the side. "Least inside will know. One way or another." They picked their way through the militarized ruins. The closer they got to VRI, the worse it became. Not just the bloom, though that was everywhere, growing in patterns that made geometry weep, but what it had done to the things caught in its expansion. A soldier fused to his weapon, both of them become something new and terrible. A medical tent where the patients and equipment had merged into a single organism that still seemed to be trying to heal itself over and over, forever. Dogs, military dogs with their handlers grown into them, for legs and two, all of them wrong. "Don't look," Lena said when Marcus stopped to stare at something that might have been playing children once. "Can't not look," he said. "It's everywhere." The first of the warped appeared as they reached VRI's outer perimeter. Came from nowhere or from everywhere. The distinction didn't matter when the walls themselves were alive. Man-shaped but stretched, its limbs too long and jointed in too many places. Skin like bark if bark could bleed. A face that was mostly suggestion, features sliding and reforming as they watched. Didn't attack. Just observed them with organs that weren't quite eyes, making sounds that weren't quite words. When David raised his rifle, it tilted its head. A movement that involved its whole torso bending in ways that made Lena's stomach turn. "Wait," she said. The warp circled them slowly. Up close, she could see it had been human once. The ghost of a face floated under the surface of its new flesh. A name tag, partially absorbed but still readable. Dr. H. Mills. Help? It might have been trying to say. Or hello. Or something else entirely. Some word from whatever language the transformed spoke among themselves. More came from the twisted architecture. A woman whose lower body had become root system, dragging herself forward on arms that branched like trees. Something child-sized but wrong, scuttling on too many limbs that ended in what looked like human fingers. They gathered but didn't attack, just watched with their not-quite faces. "They're studying us," David said, voice tight. "Or remembering," Lena suggested. Marcus coughed again, harder this time. The sound drew the warp's attention like a magnet. They pressed closer, their movements eager now. One reached out with a hand that split into tendrils halfway down, almost touching Marcus before he jerked back. "Move," David ordered. "Now." They pushed through the gathering crowd of transformed. The warp let them pass, but followed, an escort of nightmares shepherding them toward VRI's entrance. Or what had been an entrance. Now it was more like a mouth, the doorway expanded and organic, breathing slowly. "I'll take point," David said, but Marcus was already moving. "My turn," he said, and before anyone could stop him, he'd stepped through. The scream that followed was short and wet. Lena and David rushed after him, into darkness that squirmed. They found Marcus 20 feet in, or what was left of him. Something had taken him apart with the kind of efficiency that suggested practice. But even as they watched, the pieces were being gathered by things that might have been hands once, carried deeper into the building with reverent care. "Marcus!" David started forward, but Lena caught his arm. "He's gone. We can't just. He's gone." She said it harder, making him see, making him understand that gone meant something different here. David's face went through several expressions before settling on empty. "Yeah, okay." They kept moving because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant breaking. The inside of VRI was worse than the outside. hallways that breathed, walls that wept, laboratories where experiments had continued long after the experimenters had become part of them. In one room, Lena saw figures in lab coats moving in endless loops, performing the same procedures on subjects that were themselves recursive horror without end. "Hear that?" David whispered. Lena did. Music or something like it. Complex harmonies that seemed to come from the building itself, from the bloom that had become its bones and blood. Under it, barely audible human voices singing children's songs, prayer fragments, whispered equations that solved themselves into screaming. They followed the sound because it was better than wandering blind. Upstairs that weren't quite stairs anymore, through doors that opened before they reached them. The warped followed at a distance, their escort growing larger with each floor. "Why aren't they attacking?" David muttered. Lena touched the music box at her hip. It was warm, almost hot, vibrating in harmony with the building's song. "They're waiting. For what?" She didn't answer because she didn't know, or didn't want to know. The sound led them to what might have been an auditorium once. Now it was a cathedral of meat and meaning. The space expanded beyond physical possibility. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that might have been writing in a language nobody living could read. At the center, where the stage should have been, was a massive growth that hurt to look at directly, too organic, too aware, too much like looking at your own organs from the inside. "Is that?" David couldn't finish the question. "The heart," Lena said. "Or brain. Or both." The warp that had followed them spread out around the space, taking positions like an audience, or witnesses. The singing grew louder, and Lena realized it was coming from them too now. Dozens of throats that weren't quite human anymore joining the building's chorus. Something vast shifted in the central mass. Not movement exactly, but a change in attention, like being noticed by something the size of a mountain. David made a sound that might have been prayer or profanity. "We should go," he said. "Now, while we can." But Lena was already walking forward, drawn by the pull she'd felt since leaving the truck. The music box burned against her hip. Behind her, she heard David curse, then follow. He wouldn't leave her. Even here, even now, he wouldn't leave her alone. The mass pulsed and something emerged from it. Not born, nothing that purposeful, more like exhaled. It unfolded in ways that made direction meaningless, becoming more real with each impossible angle. When it finished becoming, Lena saw what Marcus had become. He stood before them, but stood was the wrong word. Existed, maybe. The bloom had remade him into something between architecture and animal. His skin had become surface for new growth, his bones the framework for something that had never been human but remembered humanity like a dream. Where his face should have been was a garden of sense organs that saw in spectrums beyond naming. "Lena," he said, and his voice was a chord, every version of himself speaking at once. "It doesn't hurt." David raised his rifle, the gesture automatic, meaningless. What would bullets do to something that had been unmade and remade at levels smaller than thought? "Don't," Lena said, but she was talking to Marcus, not David. "Don't lie." The Marcus thing tilted what might have been its head. "Not lying, just different. Pain needs boundaries, edges. I don't have those anymore." "What do you have?" "Everything. Nothing. The space between." He moved closer, and reality rippled around him. "It wants to show you, wants you to understand. We were wrong, Lena, about all of it." Wrong how? But David had heard enough. He fired 3 shots center mass, training overriding sense. The bullets passed through Marcus like he was made of intention instead of matter. Where they struck the far wall, flowers bloomed, gorgeous and wrong. The Marcus thing looked at David with organs that weren't eyes. Still trying to kill what you don't understand. Still thinking in endings. He reached out with something that had been an arm. "Let me show you."
"No."
David backed away, but there wasn't anywhere to go. The warped had closed the circle. "Stay back." Stay the fuck back. It happened fast. David turned to run, saw the wall of transformed flesh behind him, panicked. His rifle swung wild, firing at anything that moved. The warped didn't retaliate. They didn't need to. David's own momentum carried him into their reaching arms. He fought. God, he fought. But fighting meant touching, and touching meant joining. And the bloom had been waiting so patiently for him to understand. Lena watched them take him apart with the same reverent efficiency they'd shown Marcus. Watched them carry the pieces toward the central mass. "Wait," she called, but her voice sounded small in the organic cathedral. The Marcus thing turned back to her. "He'll be happier. We're all happier now. Complete. That's not happiness. That's just absence. Maybe they're the same." Lena found herself alone with the thing her friend had become, surrounded by witnesses that had once been human. The music box burned against her hip, its heat spreading through her body like fever, or infection, or revelation. "Your turn," the Marcus thing said gently. "It's time, Lena. Time to stop carrying all that weight." She thought about David, probably already being rewoven into something new. About Marcus, standing before her as proof that death was negotiable. About Maya, whose voice she'd been following since this all started. "Not yet," she said, and her voice was steadier than she felt. "Not here. Where then?" She looked past him to the pulsing heart of VRI, the source of the song that had been calling her home. Deeper, all the way down, where she is. The Marcus thing made a sound that might have been surprise. "She's everywhere, Lena. In every spore, every growth, every transformed cell. You're already inside her."
No.
The first her. The real her. Lena touched the music box, felt its simple human warmth against the alien fever of the building. "The one I came to find." Something shifted in the cathedral. The warped stirred, their attention focusing on her with uncomfortable intensity. The central mass pulsed faster, like a heart learning excitement. "Dangerous," the Marcus thing said. "Even for us. The deep places remember differently. Angrier. I know. You'll die. Probably. Why?" It was a good question. Lena thought about it while the building sang around her, while her transformed friend waited with infinite patience. "Because I promised," she said finally. "And promises matter, even here, especially here." The Marcus thing studied her with its garden of senses. Then it did something that might have been a nod. The old maintenance shaft, sublevel 7. That's where the first growth still lives, where she took root. "Thank you. Don't. I'm not doing you a favor." He moved aside, and the warped parted like a curtain. "But maybe someone should remember us as we were, before we became perfect." Lena walked past him, through the congregation of transformed, toward a door that opened onto darkness. Behind her, the Marcus thing called out one last time. "Lena, when you find her, tell her we forgive her. Tell her we understand." She didn't reply. Some messages were too heavy to carry. The maintenance shaft was a throat that had learned to swallow. Lena descended through organic darkness, her flashlight carving useless wounds in the black. The walls breathed around her, slick with secretions that might have been digestive or might have been welcoming. Hard to tell the difference anymore. The music box had gone from burning to singing, vibrating against her hip with frequencies that made her teeth ache. It was talking to the building, or the building was talking to it, or maybe they were the same thing now. She'd stopped trying to understand. Understanding was a luxury she couldn't afford. Down and down, past sublevels that shouldn't exist, through spaces that folded in on themselves like fever dreams. The temperature dropped with each revolution of the spiral, her breath misting in air that tasted of copper and communion wine. She passed other travelers, or what was left of them. Scientists grown into the walls, their lab coats spread like wings, still taking notes with fingers that had become pencils, writing observations on their own skin. A security team fused into a single mass, multiple faces sharing the same scream. Children, God. There had been children here, transformed into gardens of impossible beauty, their laughter preserved in the tinkling of cellular wind chimes. Almost there, the walls whispered in Maya's voice. But not Maya, not anymore. The shaft ended at a door that had no business existing. Wood, not metal. Hand-carved with bears and salmon and stories Lena remembered from childhood. The kind of door her grandmother might have made if her grandmother had been a god with a sense of humor. She pushed it open. The space beyond defied geometry. It might have been a laboratory once, but the bloom had made it into something between a womb and a cathedral. The walls curved up and up, disappearing into bioluminescent mist. The floor was soft, organic, warm like living flesh. And everywhere, the growths were different, not the pale fungal masses of the upper levels, but something richer, stranger. Garden and graveyard and nursery all at once. At the center grew a tree that had never been a tree. Its trunk was braided from what might have been spinal columns, its branches reaching in directions that hurt to follow. Things hung from those branches, cocoons or fruit or both, each one pulsing with its own light, its own rhythm, its own terrible potential. Under the tree, something waited. It took Lena's eyes a moment to make sense of what she was seeing. The shape was wrong. Too many legs, angles that belonged to insects or nightmares, a size that shifted depending on how directly she looked. But at its center, half absorbed but still distinct, was a human torso. A child's torso, Maya's torso. "You came," it said, and the voice was exactly as Lena remembered. Sweet, young, a little breathless like she'd been running. "I knew you would. You always keep your promises." Lena's legs gave out. She sat hard on the organic floor, the music box clattering against her hip. Maya. Sometimes. The thing under the tree shifted, and for a moment Lena saw her sister clearly. Really saw her, not the memory or the hope, but the truth. Half girl, half growth, suspended between human and horror. Sometimes I remember being Maya. Sometimes I remember being other things. The tree helps me sort them out. Does it hurt? A sound that might have been laughter. Everything hurts, Lena. That's how you know you're alive. But it's not bad hurt. Just big. Too big for what I used to be. Lena pulled out the music box with shaking hands. The painted bears seemed to glow in the chamber's strange light. "I brought this. Found it in." She couldn't finish. "In the camp." "I know. I watched." The Maya thing moved closer, its insect legs clicking on the floor. "I've been watching since High Pine, since you escaped and I didn't. I tried to find you, searched everywhere. I know that too." The appendage that might have been a hand reached out, not quite touching the music box. "But I wasn't lost, Lena. I was changing, becoming. The nice doctor said it would make me special. Dr. Walsh."
No.
"The other one, Dr. Collins. He said the medicine would help, but it didn't feel like help. It felt like being taken apart and put back together by something that had only seen pictures of humans." The child's voice remained steady, matter of fact. "He locked us in the basement, all of us special children. Said it was for observation." Lena's hands tightened on the music box.
I'm sorry.
"I'm so sorry I wasn't there." "Why? You couldn't have stopped it." "Nobody could." The Maya thing settled back under its tree. "The bloom was already here, you know, before the doctors, before VRI. It was quiet, sleeping in the deep places. They woke it up, taught it to want things, taught it about humans and consciousness and fear. And it learned. Oh yes, it's a very good student. Something like pride in that young voice. It learned about love too, about family, about the promises people make to each other. That's why I'm still here, still me enough to talk. Because you promised to find me, and the bloom respects that. In its way." Lena wound the music box key with trembling fingers. "I should have been faster. Should have. Should have died at High Pine with everyone else? The Maya thing's human parts shook with something like a head shake.
No.
Then who would have remembered us? Who would have carried our song this far? The music box began to play. The simple melody seemed impossibly small in the vast space, but it carried. The growths on the walls responded, pulsing in time, adding their own harmonies until the childhood tune became something larger. "That's pretty," Maya said softly. "I remember that song. Mom used to hum it when she cooked. Before, Lena agreed. They sat together, sisters separated by transformation but not by love, as the music box played its tinny hymn. Around them, the chamber responded, lights dimming and brightening, the trees' branches swaying to rhythms only they could feel. Other things stirred in the cocoons, drawn by the human music, but they didn't emerge. Not yet. "I'm tired," Lena said when the music stopped. "I know. I think I came here to die, to stop carrying all this weight. I know that too." Lena looked at the thing her sister had become, really looked past the horror to what lay beneath. "Will it hurt? Everything hurts," Maya repeated, "but not forever, and you won't be alone." Lena felt the truth of it in her bones. She was already changing, had been since she'd entered VRI, maybe since before. The spores in her lungs, the fever in her blood, the way the music box's song seemed to come from inside her now. Her skin showed the first faint traceries of transformation, delicate as frost, inevitable as spring. "I'm scared," she admitted. "That's okay. I was scared too. But then I became bigger than the fear." The Maya thing moved closer, and Lena didn't pull away. "I can make it easier. Show you what you'll become. Would that help?" Lena thought about it. About David and Marcus transformed into architects of their own remaking. About the children in the walls singing forever. About all the ways a human could become something else. "No," she said finally. "But thank you." "Then what?" Lena set the music box on the ground between them, its painted bears bright against the organic floor. "Play with me, like we used to, before it all went wrong." For a moment, the chamber held its breath. Then the Maya thing laughed. Real laughter, human and whole. "Okay." And they did. In that impossible space, in the heart of humanity's ending, two sisters played. Lena wound the music box again and again, and Maya sang along in a voice that wasn't quite human but remembered how to be. They told stories about the painted bears, gave them names and adventures. They remembered their grandmother's house, the smell of bread, the way light looked through clean windows. Time went strange. Minutes or hours or days, Lena couldn't tell. The transformation crept through her body, but gently now, like falling asleep in a warm bath. Her vision began to shift, showing her colors that didn't have names. Her hearing expanded, catching frequencies that told stories in languages older than words. "Lena," Maya's voice, distant now. "You're going away, not away." Words were getting hard. Her mouth was forgetting its shape, just changing. "Like you. Will you still be my sister? Always." The word came out fractured, harmonized with itself. Always and always. The last thing Lena saw with human eyes was Maya's face. Not the transformed horror, but the child she'd been, superimposed like a ghost over what she'd become. Smiling. Peace. The last thing she heard was the music box, playing one final time as her fingers forgot how to wind it. The last thing she felt was Maya's hand, or something like a hand, taking hers. Then the change took her completely, and Lena discovered what lay on the other side of human. It wasn't death. It was just different. In the deep chamber beneath VRI, two figures sat beneath a tree that had never been a tree. One had been a child, transformed into something between guardian and garden. The other had been a woman, now becoming something new, something that bridged the gap between what was lost and what was found. Between them, A music box painted with dancing bears sat silent, its last note hanging in air that remembered how to listen. Above them, VRI pulsed with its collected consciousnesses, each one a note in a song too large for any single throat to sing. The bloom grew and spread and transformed, patient as geology, certain as sunrise. And in the heart of it all, two sisters held hands across the divide of transformation, proof that some promises survive even the ending of the world. 3 days later, they found her. Elijah saw her first, his flashlight catching the impossible. A perfect circle of clear floor in a chamber that should have been choked with growth. "Here," he called, his voice cracking. "Someone's here." Mara pushed past him, rifle ready for threats that didn't come. The chamber was vast, organic, breathing with slow intent. But there, in a pool of calm amid the biological storm, lay a woman, intact, untransformed, as if the bloom itself had drawn back in respect or recognition. "That's not possible," Miguel said. He'd been saying that a lot since entering VRI, each time with less conviction. Chloe moved forward like a sleepwalker, drawn by something the others couldn't feel. The bloom song changed around her, harmonies shifting to accommodate her presence. She knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb the perfect circle of preservation. The woman looked peaceful. That was the strangest part. In a place where death came with tendrils and transformation, she simply looked like she'd gone to sleep. Her clothes were worn but intact. Her skin showed no signs of fungal integration, and clutched in her hand, as if it were the most precious thing in the world, was a small wooden box painted with bears. "She's like me," Chloe whispered. "Was like me, sensitive to the frequencies. But she came here on purpose." Her hands hovered over the body, not quite touching. "She came here to find someone." "Who?" Elijah had his equipment out, documenting everything. But his usual scientific detachment was cracking. There was something about the scene, the piece of it, the deliberate preservation, that demanded more than observation. "Sister," Chloe said simply. She came to find her sister. Mara scanned the chamber, looking for threats, exits, answers. "The bloom killed her?" "No." Chloe's voice was certain. She gave herself to it, but someone, kept her separate after, held her apart from the integration, protected her. She looked up, eyes reflecting the chamber's bioluminescence. "There's consciousness here, old consciousness. It knew her, loved her." "That's not how the bloom works," Miguel protested. "Isn't it?" Chloe stood slowly. "We keep thinking of it as a disease, parasite, but what if it's more? What if it can learn not just our fears but our loves?" Rex knelt beside the body, soldier's instincts checking for traps, threats, anything that might endanger his team. But all he found was stillness. And the music box, its painted surface somehow untouched by decay or growth. "Should we," he gestured vaguely, "take her? Bury her?" The options seemed equally impossible. "No," Chloe said firmly. "She's where she chose to be, where she's meant to be." She looked around the chamber with new understanding. "This is a shrine." The bloom made her a shrine. Elijah was scanning the walls, where growth patterns formed shapes almost like writing. "There's information here, encoded in the structure. If I could just..." He trailed off, lost in analysis. But Mara was watching Chloe. The girl, though was she still a girl, stood in the center of the preserved circle, her presence somehow fitting, as if she belonged here, bridging the gap between human and other. "We should go," Mara said quietly. "We got what we came for, the data from the upper levels. No need to push deeper." "But the answers," Elijah started. "Some answers cost too much." Mara's voice carried the weight of command. "We have enough. Time to go." They left the chamber slowly, reluctantly. Each of them looked back at the woman lying in her circle of preservation, at the music box in her hand, at the impossible piece of her face. Chloe was the last to leave. She stood at the threshold, head tilted, listening to something only she could hear. "Thank you," she said to the empty air. Or maybe not to the empty air. Maybe to whatever consciousness had kept this one human woman separate from the collective transformation. Whatever loved her enough to let her remain herself, even in death. The chamber pulsed once, acknowledgement or farewell, and then they were climbing back through the levels of VRI, carrying their data and their questions and the memory of a woman who'd found what she came looking for. Behind them, in the deep places where the bloom sang its ancient songs, Lena slept on. The music box in her hand caught the bioluminescent light, its painted bears dancing in the glow. And somewhere in the vast consciousness of the transformed, two sisters continued their eternal play, proof that not all changes were losses, and not all endings were cruel. The expedition team emerged from VRI changed by what they'd seen. They carried back more than data. They carried the knowledge that the bloom was not simple, not just hunger and transformation. Could learn, could preserve, could perhaps even love. Whether that made it more terrifying or less, none of them could say. The wall smells like hot metal and bird shit. Lena crouches in the morning shadow of a rusted water tower, studying the checkpoint. 3 days since Maya died. 3 days walking north through the barrens with the music box heavy in her pocket. The checkpoint sprawls across the highway, shipping containers stacked into guard towers, chain-link corridors funneling toward processing. Soldiers move in hazmat suits, yellow plastic catching the sun. Behind it all, the wall, 30 feet of concrete topped with razor wire. 23 years of construction, keeping the valley in. A crow lands on the razor wire. 2 seconds later, it drops. Lena's watched 6 birds die that way in the past hour. Move along, vagrant. The soldier's voice comes through a speaker mounted on the nearest tower. Lena raises her hands, stands slowly. Her knees pop like firecrackers. "I'm from High Pine Crest," she calls out, requesting passage. Silence. Then, approach the yellow line. Keep your hands visible. The yellow line is painted 50 feet from the first fence. Lena walks toward it, each step deliberate. She's seen what happens to people who move too fast near military checkpoints. Her mother taught her that back when her mother was still human. More soldiers emerge from the processing station. Their hazmat suits make them look like insects. No faces, just reflective visors and breathing apparatus. One carries a clipboard. Another hefts a flamethrower. "Stop at the line," speaker voice orders. Lena stops. The concrete burns through her worn boots. Name: Lena Park. Settlement of origin: High Pine Crest. Status of settlement: gone. Burned 3 nights ago. The soldier with the clipboard makes notes. The one with the flamethrower hasn't looked away. Any bites, scratches, or fluid exposure? No. Remove your jacket. She complies. They'll want to see her skin. Check for the telltale white veins of infection. Standard procedure. Turn around. Slowly, she turns. Behind her, maybe half a mile back, something moves in the heat shimmer. Could be a rock. Could be the thing that's been following her since the Barrens. The thing that wears Maya's voice but walks on too many legs. "You alone?" The question makes her throat close. "Yes." "Any other survivors from your settlement?" "I don't know. Some took the North Pass." Time of last potential exposure? When Maya died in her arms. When the station burned. When she walked through the ashes of her home. 3 days ago. More note-taking. The soldiers confer, voices muffled by their suits. Finally, speaker voice returns to his tower. "Collection team will escort you to observation. Do not approach until they signal. Do not make sudden movements. Compliance is mandatory." The weight stretches. Sweat runs down Lena's spine. The music box sits heavy in her jacket pocket. and she wonders if they'll let her keep it. A convoy emerges from behind the shipping containers, 2 trucks with caged beds. A dozen soldiers in full hazmat gear climb out, form a corridor. "Approach," one calls. Single file. No contact. Lena picks up her jacket, walks the gauntlet of yellow plastic and rifle barrels. Up close, she can see the soldiers' eyes through their visors. Young faces, most of them. The truck bed reeks of disinfectant and fear sweat. 3 other refugees huddle on metal benches. An old man with milky cataracts, a woman clutching a bundle that might be a baby, and a teenage boy with the 1,000-yard stare she recognizes from her mirror. "Where from?" the boy asks as the truck lurches into motion. "High Pine, Sunset Ridge," he says. "Well, what's left of it?" The woman doesn't look up from her bundle. The old man might be asleep or dead. They pass through 3 more checkpoints, each more fortified than the last. Guard dogs that strain against chains. Machine gun nests. A burned perimeter where nothing grows. The observation camp squats in its shadow like a tumor. "Processing," a soldier shouts as they roll through the final gate. "Everybody out. Leave all belongings in the vehicle." Lena's fingers find the music box. Such a small thing. All she has left of Maya, of home, of the life from before. She considers hiding it, but where? They'll strip her down, search every crevice. Better to surrender it and hope. She places it on the truck bed with careful hands. The painted dancers catch the light, and for a moment she hears the melody. The teenage boy tilts his head. "You hear that?" he asks. Before she can answer, they're herded off the truck. The processing is methodical degradation. Strip, chemical showers that burn, bend, spread, cough. A doctor examines every inch for infection, shines lights, takes blood. How long since exposure? 3 days. Any symptoms? Auditory hallucinations. My dead sister won't stop following me.
No.
72-hour observation. Any signs of infection, you'll be isolated. They give her gray coveralls that smell like industrial bleach, rubber sandals that don't fit. Her possessions go into a clear bag marked with her assigned number, N447. She watches them seal the music box inside, and something twists in her chest. The observation pen is exactly what she expected, a cage for humans. Chain link fence topped with razor wire, packed dirt floor, chemical toilets along one wall. Maybe 40 people crammed into a space meant for 20. Lena claims a corner spot back to the fence. Old instincts from childhood in overcrowded settlement dorms. The other refugees eye her with wary calculation, sorting her into threat categories. She's young, relatively healthy, traveling alone. That makes her either dangerous or vulnerable. The sun climbs. The pen heats up like an oven. Water comes twice a day in jerry cans, distributed by soldiers who won't come closer than 10 feet. Food is military rations tossed over the fence. Lena catches one, reads the expiration date. 2 years passed. Even the outside doesn't want to waste resources on maybes. She's picking at the gelatinous meat when someone sits next to her. The teenage boy from the truck, still wearing that blank stare. "Marcus," he says, "Sunset Ridge." "Lena, that music box, it yours?" Her shoulders tense. "Yeah, my sister had one like it. Same song, even." He pulls his knees to his chest. She played it constantly, drove everyone crazy. Where is she now? Walking around Sunset Ridge, probably, looking for new friends. His voice doesn't change, but tears track through the dirt on his face. The hollows came during morning lessons, used the teacher's voice to call the kids outside. Sophie went with the others. I tried to stop her, but she said Miss Moreno needed them for a special project.
I'm sorry.
Are you? He looks at her sideways. Or are you just saying what you're supposed to say? The question catches her off guard. In the valley, you said sorry and moved on. Everyone had dead. You couldn't stop to really feel it. Both, she admits. Marcus nods. That's honest. They sit in shared silence while the pen fills. A family from Pine Falls. 2 old women from Carson's Ford. A man with a bandaged arm who won't say where he's from. As the sun sets, Lena spots a familiar face. David Reeves, Emma's older brother. He's grayer than she remembers, favoring his left leg, but alive. Their eyes meet across the pen, and he pushes through the crowd. Lena? Jesus Christ, you made it out. David. She accepts his brief hug, feeling his ribs through the coveralls. Emma? She stayed to buy us time. Her and her boy. His voice roughens. 12 of us made it to the North Pass. Lost 3 more in the murmur. Rest are here somewhere. Different pens, probably. Maya. She shakes her head. Can't form the words.
Ah, kid. I'm sorry.
And from him, she believes it. David had helped board up their windows before the first winter storm. Had shared venison when his hunting trips went well. Valley folk took care of their own when they could. Listen, he continues, lowering his voice. Something's wrong here. Guards are jumpy, more than usual. And I heard one talking about multiple breaches along the eastern section. Breaches in the wall? Don't know, but they've doubled the sonic barriers. You see those towers? Acoustic deterrence. Same frequency as our pickets, but stronger. Should. The word tastes like ash. Yeah, should. He glances around. Your girl Maya. How did she? The bloom took her. Slow. She had time to say goodbye. That's something, at least. When the fast hollow got my Luke, he was gone between breaths. No warning. Just gone. David rubs his face. 15 years I kept that boy safe, and it still got him. The lights come on as full dark falls, turning the pen into a harsh white box. Insects swarm the bulbs, die in drifts beneath. Lena tries to find a comfortable position on the packed earth, using her arm as a pillow. That's when she hears it. Faint, almost lost in the drone of the sonic barriers. Tinny melody, the music box, playing somewhere in the processing building. But that's impossible. Sealed in quarantine. Lena, her blood freezes. That voice, sweet, high, exactly as she remembers. Lena, where are you? I can't find you. She rolls over, peers through the chain link. Nothing but darkness beyond the lights. I'm cold, Lena, and everyone here is so quiet. Don't answer. Don't look. I brought friends. Remember Rebecca? She's here. More voices join in. Come play with us. We know new games. Lena presses her palms against her ears, but the voices are inside now, using frequencies that bypass flesh and bone. Around her, refugees sleep fitfully, unaware of the conversation happening in the spaces between sound. We learned so much while you were gone, Maya continues, about the music, about the patterns, about what happens next. The music box melody continues, a bright thread weaving through the darkness. And now Lena can hear other things, footsteps that don't match any human gait, breathing that sounds like wind through empty buildings, the wet sound of something large pressing against the sonic barriers, testing their limits. The soldiers can't hear us. Their machines make too much noise. But you can hear, can't you? Because you carry the song inside you. Our mother's song. Our real mother. Not the one you remember. That's not Maya. Maya is dead. I burned her body in the barrens. Bodies don't matter. Only the pattern matters. And the pattern remembers everything. A thud against the fence makes her jump. Then another. The chain link bulges inward, straining. In the darkness beyond the lights, shapes move. Child-sized shapes that walk wrong, bend wrong, are wrong. Let us in, Lena. It's cold out here and we've come so far. Don't you want to see me again? She wants to scream, wants to wake the others, raise the alarm. But her throat locks, voice stolen by the same impossible frequency, that carries her sister's words. The music box plays on, its melody now a funeral dirge for everyone who thought the wall meant safety. In the processing building, she imagines it sitting in its sealed bag, mechanisms turning without hands to wind them. Playing because the bloom has learned new tricks. Playing because this was always going to happen. Playing because the song was never just a song. The fence bulges again, and in the darkness, Maya laughs. Dawn comes like a hangover. Lena hasn't slept. Every time her eyes closed, the voices got louder. Not just Maya now, but a whole playground's worth. Counting rhymes, jump rope songs, nonsense lyrics kids make up when they're bored. All of it underlaid with that tinny music box melody that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. Her corner of the fence shows no sign of last night's pressure. No bent links, no stretched metal. Like it never happened. But the taste of copper in her mouth says otherwise. "You look like shit," Marcus says, dropping beside her. "Thanks. Seriously, you sick." He scoots back slightly. Everyone's paranoid about early-stage infection, watching for the telltale signs. The glassy eyes, the tremors, the way infected people start responding to things nobody else can hear. "Just tired." "Yeah, well, get used to it." My second time through one of these camps. Sleep doesn't come easy when you're waiting to see who goes hollow. Second time. First camp was outside Carson's Ford. Made it through the full 72, got cleared, started the journey to the relocation center. His laugh is bitter. 3 days out, one of the cleared refugees started singing lullabies to her own intestines, tore them out with her bare hands, tried to make a cat's cradle. Guards burned the whole convoy. I only made it because I was taking a piss in the bushes when it started. Jesus. Yeah, so now I'm back in the pen, wondering if 72 hours means anything at all. He picks at a scab on his knuckle. "That music last night. You heard it, right?" Lena's throat goes tight. "What music? Don't bullshit me. I saw your face. Same look my sister got when she heard things nobody else could." He leans closer, drops his voice. "It's starting again. Whatever happened in the valley, it's not staying there." Before she can respond, commotion erupts near the gate. New arrivals, a group of 20 or so, herded in by guards who look even jumpier than yesterday. These refugees are different. Fresher wounds, wilder eyes. Some still wear fragments of bloom growth on their clothes, pale threads that the decontamination couldn't quite remove. Survivors from the eastern settlements, David says, joining them. His face is grim. Guards were talking. Eastbrook, Miller's Point, even Fort Carpenter. All gone in the last 48 hours. Fort Carpenter. That was supposed to be the safest settlement in the valley, built around an old military depot with actual walls, not just jury-rigged barriers. If Fort Carpenter had fallen, "It's accelerating," Lena says. "The bloom. It's not just spreading. It's learning faster." "Learning what?" Marcus asks. "How to win." The new refugees integrate poorly. They cluster together, speaking in whispers, flinching at sudden movements. One woman rocks back and forth, humming something that sounds almost like the music box tune, but not quite. Close enough to make Lena's skin crawl. The morning water delivery comes late. When it does arrive, there's not enough. The jerry cans run dry with a third of the pens still waiting. Shoving matches break out. An old man gets knocked down, splits his lip on the packed earth. The guards watch from their towers, hands on weapons but not intervening. "They're going to let us tear each other apart," David observes. Saves them the trouble. The bandaged man from yesterday pushes through the crowd, favoring his wrapped arm. As he reaches for one of the remaining cups, his bandage slips. The wound beneath is moving, not healing, not infected in any normal way. Moving, like something underneath is trying to find its way out. The skin ripples, forms patterns that almost look like writing. Someone screams. The crowd explodes outward. "Ha!" he says. "That's new." The guards react instantly. Flamethrower units move to the fence, nozzles aimed. A speaker crackles. Infected individual, move to the isolation gate. Comply immediately or face termination. I'm not infected. The man protests. It's. He trails off, watching his arm write impossible messages on itself. Oh, I see. That makes sense. Move to isolation. Final warning. He doesn't move. Can't, maybe. His legs lock, muscles fighting some internal command. When he speaks again, it's in harmony with itself. Two voices from one throat. The frequency is wrong here. Too much interference. We can't integrate properly. Please adjust the sonic barriers to. Fire engulfs him mid-sentence. The screaming lasts longer than it should. Even as his flesh chars, he keeps trying to communicate, voice rising and falling through octaves no human throat should produce. When he finally collapses, the quiet is worse than the screams. The guards spray foam over the remains, then drag them out with long poles. Nobody drinks the rest of the water. Inside job, someone mutters. He was fine yesterday. The bloom's already in here with us. Could be in anyone. Another voice agrees. In the water, in the food. The paranoia spreads faster than any infection. By afternoon, the pen has fractured into suspicious clusters. The new arrivals keep to themselves. The family from Pine Falls builds a fort from empty ration boxes. Trust dissolves like sugar in rain. Lena stays in her corner, but isolation draws attention. She catches people staring, whispering. The woman who was humming earlier points at her, says something to her companions. They nod, edges of their mouths tight with the kind of fear that turns violent. Problem? David asks, settling beside her again. Besides everything? I mean specifically, that group's been eyeing you for an hour. No idea, but she does have an idea. The music box played last night. Maya's voice called to her, and now people are looking at her the way they look at infection vectors. Like she's already gone but doesn't know it yet. The afternoon drags. Heat builds in the pen despite the wall's shadow. The chemical toilets overflow, adding ammonia sting to the bouquet of sweat and fear. Guards come to empty them but work hurriedly, nervously. One keeps glancing at the sky like he expects something to fall. Changing of the guards soon, Marcus notes. He's stuck close to Lena and David, forming an alliance of the reasonably sane. Always a weak point. Fresh guards don't know faces, don't know who's been acting strange. You thinking of running? David asks. Thinking of options. 72 hours assumes the camp holds that long. He gestures at the degrading situation. Does this look like it'll hold? As if in response, one of the sonic barrier towers sparks. The hum it produces warbles, goes shrill, then cuts out entirely. Guards scramble to fix it, but the damage cascades. Another tower flickers. Another. In the sudden quiet, Lena hears it again. The music box. Closer now. Shit, Marcus breathes. You hear that? This time, she's not the only one. Heads turn throughout the pen, tracking something beyond the fence. The humming woman starts rocking faster, her tune synchronizing with the distant melody. There, David points. Christ Almighty, what is that? It stands just outside the light perimeter, where shadow meets glare. At first glance, it could be a child. Right height, right general shape. But children don't have joints that bend in 3 places. Children don't walk like that. It wears Maya's face like an ill-fitting mask. Lena! It calls, voice bright and cheerful. I found you. Wasn't that a fun game? But I'm tired of playing now. Can I come in? Every eye in the pen turns to her. You know that thing? The accusation comes from the Eastern Settlement Group. A woman with gray-streaked hair and dirt-caked nails. It's calling your name. I don't. It looks like a kid, like one of the kids from Eastbrook. The woman's voice rises. The ones who disappeared first. The ones who came back wrong and led the hollows right to us. That's not what happened. Lena starts, but the woman is past listening. She brought it here, just like someone brought them to us. Probably infected already. Probably been talking to it all along. The crowd shifts, that subtle reorganization that happens before violence. David and Marcus flank her, but they're outnumbered. The guards watch from their towers, placing bets on the outcome. I'm not infected, Lena says. That thing, it killed my sister. It's wearing her face, using her voice, but it's not her. Convenient story. This from the bandaged man's corner, where his friends still cluster. Jeffrey was fine yesterday too, said all the right things. Then his arm started writing love letters to the bloom. Outside the fence, the Maya thing tilts its head at an angle necks shouldn't achieve. Why are they being mean to you? Don't they know we're family? Family should stick together. Shut up, Lena whispers. I can make them understand. Want to see? It produces something from behind its back. Even at this distance, she recognizes the music box. But that's impossible. It's in quarantine, sealed in a bag. The Maya thing winds the key with fingers that have many knuckles. The melody spills out, but different, darker. Each note seems to pull at something behind her eyes. Around the pen, people react. The humming woman stops mid-rock. A man clutches his head, whimpering. One of the Pine Falls children starts to sing along, her parents trying desperately to cover her mouth. Stop it, Lena says louder. But they're learning the song. Isn't that nice? Soon everyone will know it. Soon everyone will sing together. The Maya thing does a little twirl, its wrongly jointed legs moving in ways that hurt to track. We practiced so hard. Rebecca and the twins and all the others. We wanted it to be perfect for when you arrive. More shapes emerge from the darkness. Children, or things that used to be children. They link hands in a ring around the camp's perimeter, just outside the failing sonic barriers. Their mouths move in unison, but the sound comes from somewhere else. From the air itself, from the ground, from inside the listener's skulls. Ring around the rosy pocket full of posies. The woman from Eastbrook breaks first. She charges at Lena, screaming about infected cunts and child killers. David intercepts her, but others follow. The pen erupts, fists fly, bodies slam into chain link. Someone goes down, gets trampled. The guards shout warnings nobody hears. In the chaos, Lena glimpses Marcus fighting off two men, his young face twisted in desperation. David throws punches, but there are too many. A hand grabs her hair, yanks hard. She drives an elbow back, feels ribs give. Breaks free only to face three more refugees, their eyes wild with the particular madness of the cornered. Burn her. One chance. Burn the infection out. Burn her before she brings them in. They rush her. She sidesteps one, takes another's knee to her stomach, doubles over, gasping. Hands grab her arms, start dragging her toward the fence, toward the guards with flamethrowers. She's infected, someone screams. Burn her. Burn her now. The guards shift their weapons, uncertain. One speaks into his radio, probably asking for authorization to light up the whole pen. That's when the first sonic barrier tower explodes. Not sparks this time. A full detonation that showers the pen with burning metal. In the gap it leaves, the hollow children pour through. They move like water, flowing around obstacles, their song growing louder with each step. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. The refugees who'd been attacking Lena scatter, but the children don't chase them. They form a circle around her, linking hands, their two wide smiles all focused inward. We've been waiting, they say in unison. The pattern is almost complete. Just one more voice. The Maya thing pushes through the circle, still carrying its impossible music box. Up close, Lena can see the details wrong. Skin like rice paper, veins that pulse with bioluminescent fluid, eyes that reflect light. Don't be scared. it says with her sister's voice. It doesn't hurt. Well, it does, but only for a moment. Then you're part of everything, and the loneliness goes away forever. You're not her, Lena says. You're just an echo. I'm more her than the meat you burned in the barrens. The thing wearing Maya's face kneels, holds out the music box. She's in here. Every song she ever hummed. The bloom remembers everything. Isn't that better than death? Get the fuck away from me. Language. He giggles, sounding exactly like Maya scolding her for cursing. What would Mom say? Mom's dead. Nobody's really dead anymore. That's the gift. No more endings. No more goodbyes. Just the song going on forever. Pushes the music box closer. Take it. Wind it. Join us. She misses you so much. Around them, chaos. Guards fire into the pen. Refugees flee in all directions. The hollow children ignore it all, focused on their vigil. She looks at the music box. Such a simple thing. Wood and metal and memory. The painted dancers worn smooth by her sister's fingers. A toy that became a treasure that became a weapon. Her hand moves without conscious thought. Fingers close around the box. It's warm, warmer than wood should be, and beneath the heat, a pulse. Steady, patient, alive. Yes, the Maya thing breathes. Yes, you feel it. The truth inside the song. Wind it, Lena. Wind it and set us all free. Her other hand finds the key. Such a small motion. 3 turns, maybe 4. Then the melody would spill out, and she'd understand everything. Why the children sang. Why the bloom preserved instead of destroyed. Why her sister's voice could sound so perfect from a throat made of fungal tissue.
Lena, no.
David's voice cuts through the spell. He's fighting his way toward her, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Behind him, Marcus drags an injured refugee, trying to reach the gap in the fence. It's not her, David shouts. Whatever that thing is telling you, it's not her, but it remembers her, Lena says, surprising herself with how calm she sounds. Every word, every laugh, every time she played this song. Isn't that a kind of survival? That's not survival. That's taxidermy. He's closer now, only the ring of children between them. Maya's gone, but you're not. Don't let them take you too. The Maya thing hisses, a sound no human throat should make. He's lying. He's afraid. Afraid of connection. Afraid of unity. But you're not afraid, are you? You're tired. Tired of being alone. Tired of losing everyone. She is tired. Bone deep, soul deep tired. 3 days since Maya died. But it feels like years. A lifetime of loss compressed into a few bloody sunrises. Maybe the bloom is right. Maybe connection is better than isolation. Maybe the music box grows hotter. Not warm anymore, but burning. She looks down to see her palm blistering where it touches the wood. But she can't let go. Won't let go. The key turns under her fingers, starts to... A gunshot. Close enough that her ears ring. The Maya thing staggers back, looking down at the hole in its chest. No blood, just white threads spilling out like party streamers. It touches the wound with curious fingers. Rude, it says. Then its head explodes. David lowers his pistol, smoke curling from the barrel. Move! Now! The circle of children wavers. Without the Maya thing to anchor them, their cohesion breaks. Some wander off, still singing. Others stand frozen like puppets with cut strings. But Lena can't move. The music box has fused to her palm, skin, and would becoming one. The key keeps turning, though she's not touching it anymore. 1 rotation. 2. I can't, she starts. David doesn't hesitate. He grabs her wrist, yanks hard. The pain is extraordinary, skin tearing, blood flowing. But she's free, the music box tumbling to the dirt. It lands open, playing its tune into the chaos. Go, go, go! They run. Through the gap in the fence, past burning refugees and advancing hollows, into the maze of the processing complex. Behind them, the observation pen becomes a slaughterhouse. The children's song mixes with screams, with gunfire, with the roar of flamethrowers. But loudest of all is the music box, its melody carrying on the wind, following them, calling them home. The complex is a maze of modular buildings connected by covered walkways. Emergency lights paint everything red. Gunfire echoes, the guards have switched to extermination. This way, David gasps. Marcus stumbles, the refugee he's dragging barely conscious. Can't. He's too heavy. Leave him. Fuck you. He's infected. Look at his eyes. They look, pupils blown wide, lips moving in sync with the distant music box. Please, he whispers. The angels are singing. Marcus drops him. The man curls into himself, humming. They keep running. The complex should be full of soldiers, but they're all at the pen, trying to contain the breach. Or maybe there were never as many as it seemed. Maybe the wall has always been more theater than substance. A line drawn in dirt to make people feel safe. Supply depot, David points to a larger building ahead. Might be vehicles. Might be hollows, Lena counters. Her burned palm throbs in time with her heartbeat. The wound is already showing signs of infection. Not bloom infection, just regular bacterial. In the old world, she'd need antibiotics. In this world, she'll probably lose the hand. If she lives that long. Chance we have to take. They approach carefully, but the depot is empty except for shadows and dust. Rows of shelving hold surplus gear, hazmat suits, water purification tablets, ammunition for weapons they don't have. And in the back, beautiful as a sunrise, 3 trucks with military markings. Keys, Marcus says. Where would? David's already at a lockbox on the wall, using his pistol but to smash it open. He's rained down, each tagged with vehicle numbers. How many rounds you got left? Lena asks. 2. 2 bullets for 3 people and however many miles to safety. If safety exists, they pile into the nearest truck. David takes the wheel, hands steady despite everything. The engine turns over on the second try. Diesel growl loud in the depot. Hold on. He floors it, crashing through the depot's roll-up door in a shower of aluminum and regret. The truck lurches into the night, headlights carving through smoke from the burning pen. The access road runs along the wall's base, gravel crunching under heavy tires. To their left, 30 feet of concrete supposedly protecting the world. To their right, the processing complex burns. And ahead, gate, Marcus says. Shit, there's a gate. Chain link and razor wire blocking the road. A guard post beside it, dark windows reflecting fire. Ram it, Lena suggests. Could work. David shifts gears, building speed. Could also flip us. Do we have a choice? The answer comes from the guard post. A figure emerges, rifle raised. But something's wrong with how it moves. Too fluid, joints working in ways that suggest inhuman flexibility. That's not a guard, Marcus breathes. The figure's head tilts at an impossible angle, and even through the windshield, they can hear it singing. The same melody. Always the same fucking melody. David floors it. The truck hits the gate at 40 miles per hour. Metal screams, tears, gives way. They're through, fishtailing on loose gravel. The hollow guard fires, bullets sparking off the truck's armor. Then they're around a bend, and it's gone. Jesus, Marcus laughs, high and hysterical. We made it. We actually. Look at the road, Lena interrupts. David sees it too, slows the truck to a crawl. The checkpoint they passed through 3 days ago is abandoned. Gates hang open, guard towers empty. Debris litters the asphalt. Abandoned gear, papers, dark stains. Maybe they evacuated, Marcus says without conviction. They drive through in silence. The road continues north to the outer perimeter, the final checkpoint. Comes into view as they crest a rise. or what's left of it. Burned husks, vehicles in neat rows, windows shattered, and everywhere pale growths creep across surfaces. No, David says. He stops the truck. They sit processing what they see. The bloom has breached the wall. Not recently, the growth patterns suggest weeks. Long before high pine fell. It was already out, Lena says. The whole time. The quarantine. Marcus starts, then stops. What's the point of finishing? They all understand now. The wall wasn't keeping the bloom in. It was keeping the valley folk in, containing the witnesses, letting them die slowly while the real disaster unfolded elsewhere. David puts the truck in gear. We keep going. Maybe it's localized. Maybe. The radio crackles to life. Static at first. Then, underneath the white noise, music. Tinny and distant but unmistakable. Turn it off, Lena says. David reaches for the dial. Stops. His eyes have gone wide, pupils dilating. David, my boy, he whispers. Luke's on the radio. He's saying he found a safe place. David, that's not. I know it's not him. The words come out as a snarl. I know my boy is dead. I burned his body myself. But he sounds so real. The music gets louder. Not just from the radio now, but from outside. From the abandoned vehicles. From the burned buildings. From the ground itself. We need to move, Lena says. But David's frozen, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Tears run down his face as his dead son promises it doesn't hurt. Promises they can be together again. Promises everything will be okay if he just lets go. Marcus reaches over, turns off the radio. The silence is deafening. Drive, he says quietly. Just drive. David drives. They pass through the dead checkpoint. Beyond it, actual asphalt. Mile markers to cities that might not exist. Signs for normal life. The first town appears after 20 miles. Fairhaven, population 2,847. It's empty. Not destroyed. Not burned. Just empty. Cars in driveways. Lawns growing wild. Shop windows dark. Where is everyone? Marcus asks. They already know. David pulls into a gas station. The pumps still have power, their screens glowing cheerfully. He fills the tank while Lena and Marcus raid the convenience store. The shelves are mostly empty. Whoever evacuated had time to pack. But there's water, energy bars, a first aid kit. Lena cleans her burned palm in the station bathroom. In the mirror, she looks like a ghost. 3 days since Maya died. Feels like a lifetime. Feels like yesterday. Time doesn't work right anymore. When she comes out, Marcus is standing by a magazine rack, staring at a newspaper. The date is from 6 weeks ago. The headline reads, Northeast Quarantine Zone Established AS Fungal Outbreak Spreads. Northeast, he says. We're in the Southwest. They check other papers. Maps torn from atlases. Pieced together a picture of the world while they were trapped in their valley. Multiple quarantine zones. Multiple outbreaks. Or maybe just one outbreak with many faces. The music box, Lena says suddenly. Maya wasn't the first kid to have one. Marcus, you said your sister had one too. Yeah, lots of kids did. They sold them at the markets before. He trails off, understanding. Oh fuck. They all played the same song, distributed across the valley, carried by children who played it over and over, encoding something in developing minds, a frequency that made them receptive, a pattern that called to the bloom when it was ready. It was planned, David says, all of it. Someone seeded those music boxes. Someone wanted this to happen. Or something, Lena counters. The bloom's intelligent. What if it planned its own release? They get back in the truck, drive through Fairhaven's empty streets, past a school with swings that move in no wind, past a church where the doors hang open, past normal lives interrupted. The radio stays off. Better silence than dead voices. 30 miles from Fairhaven, they find the survivors, or what's left of them, a convoy of military and civilian vehicles arranged in a defensive circle in a highway rest stop. Burned out mostly, bodies scattered between them, preserved by the dry air. But some of the bodies are moving. Not much, just enough to track the truck as it passes. Heads turning in unison. They don't attack, don't need to. Time is on their side. Keep driving, Marcus says. David keeps driving. The sun rises on a city skyline in the distance. Should mean safety, but even from here they can see the pale threads. Bloom growth climbing buildings like ivy. The city isn't dead. It's transformed. Where do we go? Marcus asks. North, Lena thinks. Toward cold. Toward anywhere but here. But she doesn't say it. Because in her pocket, salvaged from the gas station, is another music box. This one painted with bears. She found it in the toy aisle, waiting. And despite everything, she took it. Because the Bloom was right about one thing. She is tired of being alone. And if the world is ending anyway, maybe it's better to end with music than silence. The truck rolls on through a landscape learning to sing. In the distance, something vast watches with 10,000 eyes. And in Lena's pocket, the music box sits silent, waiting to be wound. Anthony White let his gaze rest upon the frozen surface of the pond before him. He was uncomfortably aware of the hushed voices coming from the dozens of young boys standing behind him at the southernmost edge of the irregularly shaped pool of ice. His friends were amongst them, he knew, holding up handwritten signs of support while occasionally calling out, "You can do it!" and "We believe in you!" However, Anthony was sure that the vast majority of the boys were hoping to see him fail his mission, giving them the ability to brag about having seen the infamous pond swallow a child whole. He supposed there might be a few kids who wanted to see him succeed, if only to find out whether the old hut across the water really was magical or not, but they were probably the ones who still had yet to be disillusioned about the existence of the Tooth Fairy. Taking in a cold, steadying breath, Anthony shifted his focus to the modest, red-roofed wooden structure on the opposite side of the pond, about 60 yards away. The hut, along with the pond itself, was backed into a hollow section of the mountain, with high, vertical stony walls that made it almost impossible to approach the hut except for via the body of water. The building was formally named the Amberson Hut after the family that owned it, but was more colloquially known as the House of Wishes. It was there that Anthony hoped to receive the one thing his heart truly desired above everything else, the return of his brother Scott. According to the legend, the House of Wishes had occupied that space for longer than anyone could remember. Even the Amberson family wasn't sure who had built the hut, or when and how it came to be passed down to their ancestors. During warmer months, the Ambersons were easily able to access the hut by boat and see to the property's upkeep. A couple of them would even spend a few nights there, enjoying the serene solitude of the place. The family noted that there was nothing special about the place other than its reputation, but that did nothing to quell the superstitions surrounding the hut and its pond. It was said that the pond was unusually deep for its size. Some of the more extreme speculations put it as deep enough to submerge an entire skyscraper. As Anthony had heard it, no one had ever been able to retrieve anything once it had sunk into the pond. Even human bodies, once taken into the water's depths, never returned to the surface. Every now and then, someone not related to the Ambersons would try rowing out to the hut in order to satisfy his own curiosity about the place, only to give up after a few yards because of an intense feeling of dread and the suddenly real possibility of sinking into the eternal murky, watery grave. Fishing could be pretty good there, but most locals chose to fish in less dangerous locations. Most of the time, it was said, the House of Wishes really was just a simple hut attached to a haunted pool of water. However, some desperate man had long ago discovered that the hut would gain the power to grant a person's deepest wish under two conditions. The pond must be completely frozen over by the 30th of December, and the pond must be crossed by foot to get to the hut before the first day of the new year. It was said that this man had made the discovery after having gotten himself lost in the middle of freak snowstorm. Looking for a way to shelter himself away from the frosty elements, he had spotted the red roof of the little hut. Knowing nothing about the curious nature of the pond, he ventured across its frozen surface without fear and entered the small building. This, as it was told, was where he was granted his greatest wish, which led to the establishment of the town that Anthony called home. Throughout the generations, many had tried to cross the ice in the hopes of having their greatest wish granted, only to have the pond's solid shell crack beneath them and plunge them into the deadly waters. Supposedly, the only known success stories involve 12-year-old boys, which was why it became a tradition for that age group to take up the challenge. Even though the pond so rarely froze over by the requisite date that sometimes decades passed before the right conditions were met, every year a single 12-year-old boy was chosen to represent his cohorts at the pond for this rite of passage. Usually, this was a symbolic position, and the chosen Wishwalker would preside over a massive snowball fight held amongst the town's youth near the pond. Anthony, this year's Wishwalker by choice rather than by chance, took a step forward and placed his cleated right foot onto the pond's surface. The whispers and occasional shouts coming from behind him suddenly went silent. Not even the sounds of respiration could be heard, as the boys seemed to be holding their breath with anticipation. Anthony kept his own breathing steady as he set his left foot ahead of the right. With grim determination, he balled his sweaty fists within his green, woolen mittens, stiffened his jaw the way he'd always seen his dad do before handling a difficult task, and then proceeded to walk at a slow and careful pace across the ice. He wondered briefly if he had been stupid to volunteer himself for what was essentially a suicide mission, but then remembered the promise he'd made to his brother. This, he thought, was the right thing to do. Of course, most of his classmates disagreed. Most notoriously, Ben Archer, the fittest of all the preteen boys in town, had mocked Anthony's decision throughout the fall, referring to him as the Death Wishwalker. Although all the boys in his age group presented themselves as willing if chosen, nobody actually wanted to walk the ice in the event that the pond froze over in time. When he had volunteered himself at the start of the school year, the other kids had called him crazy and had accused him of being a baby for believing that a simple hut could grant him a wish. Naturally, nobody objected to him taking on the role of Wishwalker if he so desired, and much of the bite was taken out of the autumn games that would usually decide who would walk the pond. The Wishwalker was always the boy who scored the least amount of points overall. Ben Archer had never been at risk. "Hey, Death Wishwalker, down here." Ben's voice seemed to come from below Anthony's feet. Despite the impossibility of Ben trying to get his attention from under the ice, Anthony looked down. He came to an abrupt halt as he saw the specter of a drowned man floating just beneath the frozen surface. The ghost's sightless eyes bore into him as he spoke again, this time using what was presumably his own voice. "If death is your wish, come let me show you the way." The man held out his hands, opening his arms as though ready to catch something from above. Anthony felt hot panic rising into his throat and, just beyond the sounds of his quickened heartbeat pounding in his ears, he heard the distinct sounds of ice cracking beneath the weight of his feet. The urge to turn and run back to safety almost took over his body, even though he knew that he would never make it. He could now see a crack forming on the ice along the side of his left foot, which looked just as ominous as the dead man's grin. His breaths were coming in short gasps now, and he felt on the verge of fainting. "Yo, bro!" shouted a voice from up ahead. Anthony was shocked and relieved to see his brother Scott waving to him from the front of the hut. His fragile body was clothed in nothing but a hospital gown, but he looked feverish nonetheless. "All you gotta do is put one foot in front of the other, remember?" Anthony did remember. He recalled those days so long ago when he and Scott used to pretend to walk the pond together, while he was helping his big brother with physical therapy. This was back when Scott's health had seemed to be rallying and everyone had thought he would be okay, before things took a turn for the worst and Scott ended up being sent away to a place of rest. Scott had thought that he would become well enough that he would be included in the upcoming year's autumn games, but not well enough to win many points. As such, he had thought it would be prudent to practice pond walking ahead of time. Anthony remembered how he and his brother would try to imagine the grandest wish possible each night before bed, which they would then focus on during their pond walk the following day. They had dreamed big in those days, going far beyond wealth and love and long life. They had wanted superpowers and galactic battles and resurrected dinosaurs. The list had gone on forever, but now none of that mattered. Looking at his brother across the pond, Anthony could hardly believe that he had ever thought there was anything more important than the reason he needed to reach the hut today. Keeping his eyes on Scott, Anthony set his jaw firm once again and took a step forward, wincing a little as the ice creaked beneath him. One foot in front of the other, he thought as he steadied his breathing and resumed his careful pace. He felt himself start to tremble with cold as a chill seemed to creep up his body from the frosty surface beneath his feet. He continued walking forward, just wanting to reach his brother, but feeling more and more frigid the further he went. Finally, having progressed just beyond the halfway point of his journey, he realized that he could no longer feel his toes. He looked down. Below him, the ice of the pond's surface, previously opaque, had become completely transparent. The dense, dark murkiness of the pond's waters was suddenly removed, affording him a view into its eternal depths. Spaced throughout this bottomless pool were the floating bodies of the countless men, women, and children who had been claimed by the pond over the years. Their upturned faces smiled at him in welcome, and, with the surface of the pond all but invisible to him, Anthony could imagine that he was already submerged with them. The ice cracked. "Bro," Scott's voice rang out to him, sounding slightly alarmed. "Remember your promise." Anthony remembered. He closed his eyes, he moved his feet forward, and he remembered. He remembered holding Scott's hand on that last day before the transfer, that final day before he would no longer get to see his brother. He remembered looking into his brother's sunken, tired eyes and vowing to bring him back home by walking the pond. He remembered, and he walked, and he cried, and the ice creaked and cracked. "Well done, bro. You made it." Anthony opened his eyes. His feet now stood on blessed solid ground, and the House of Wishes stood only a few yards in front of him. Scott wasn't there. The frosted surface of the pond behind him looked just as white and untouched as it had before he'd stepped onto it. He could see the boys across the pond jumping around and yelling with excitement, though he could hear nothing but silence. Without further ado, Anthony walked over to the red-roofed hut, held his breath, and opened the door. We went on a vacation in my dad's hometown. My dog went missing for 2 weeks. I still remember the sound of his paws tapping against the floor, the way he'd wag his tail whenever I came home, and how his eyes seemed to understand me. I miss him more than words can say. He wasn't just a pet, he was my best friend. I still hold on to the hope that my dear dog was out there somewhere, safe, maybe living with someone kind who gives him belly rubs and treats like I used to. I met a girl named Betty at the park while I was sitting alone, watching people walk their dogs. We started chatting, and it turned out she loves dogs just as much as I do. We'd talk for hours about our favorite breeds, silly pet stories, and even dreams of opening a shelter one day. One afternoon, we met up at the same park as usual. As we were laughing about her dog chasing a butterfly, we noticed a homeless old man nearby, standing oddly close to a tree. At first, I thought he was just lost, but then I froze. He leaned in and started licking the tree trunk, slowly and gross. I stared deeply, not sure what I was seeing. When the man noticed me watching, his eyes widened in panic. He wiped his mouth quickly, turned around, and ran away. I heard Betty laugh. She saw it too. I was young at the time, but even then I knew that a man licking a tree while a little girl laughed at the sight was just plain weird. We decided to head home after that, each going their separate ways. The strange man licking the tree still lingered in my thought as I walked. By the time I got home, I fed the stray cat that sometimes waited by my porch and settled into my bed. The memory began to fade like a dream slipping away. The next morning was bright and quiet until a knock came at my door. It was our new neighbor, a kid around my age named Sammy, holding a game controller in one hand. "Hey, wanna play?" he asked. And just like that, the weirdness of yesterday was pushed aside by the familiar comfort of games and new friendship. The following day, me and Betty met again at the usual spot. We decided to build sandcastles. We laughed as we compared our masterpieces. From across the park, Sammy stood silently, watching us. His hands were in his pockets, and his smile was gone. He looked bitter. He turned away, his face hardening, and kicked a pebble down the path. I didn't even notice he was there. The next day at the playground, Sammy showed up while me and Betty were finishing another sandcastle. Without saying much, Sammy walked straight up and grabbed my arm, tugging me away from Betty. "Come on, let's go play," he said, almost demanding. I pulled my arm back, frowning. "What are you doing? We're in the middle of something," I snapped. Sammy's face fell. He turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped. The mood had shifted, and I felt a pang of guilt, but I still managed to focus on playing with Betty. That evening, just before sunset, Sammy knocked on our door again, holding the same game controller. "Wanna play?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Hey, I'm sorry about earlier," I said. Sammy looked up, surprised but relieved, and smiled a little. "It's okay," he said, and just like that, the tension melted, replaced by the glow of friendship and clicking game buttons. There were times where I stared at the photos in the wall every time we paused the game. I noticed that his mom also loved dogs too much. In fact, she had more photos of dogs than of her son and husband. As we played and our laughter filled the air, my mom called, "Get home now," standing outside with her hands on her hips. I jumped and stood up quickly. "Sorry, Sammy. I have to go," I said, already heading toward the door. Sammy looked disappointed. "It's okay," he mumbled, but his voice was heavy. Before leaving, I turned and said softly, "I'm really sorry again. We'll hang out soon, I promise," then ran off. As soon as I reached home, Mom's expression shifted from stern to excited. "You won't believe this," she said, smiling and excited. "He came back." Confused, I tilted my head. "Who?" Then I heard it, a familiar bark from the backyard. My heart stopped for a moment. I sprinted and saw my dog. Dirty, a little thinner, but very much alive. I dropped to my knees as tears welled in my eyes. "You're back," I whispered. He barked joyfully and lunged into my arms as I laughed and cried, hugging him tightly like I never wanted to let go again. The next afternoon, the park was full of life. Me, Betty, and the other kids in the park played hide and seek beneath the tall trees. We giggled as one of us counted to 20 behind a slide. Everything felt normal, like any other carefree day. But as the game went on, I noticed something strange. While I was hiding behind a bush, I saw Betty sit down on the grass nearby, right in the open. At first, I thought she was just tired, but then she lifted her leg and began scratching the side of her head with her foot, just like a dog would. My eyes widened. She kept going, not even noticing me staring, and when she was done, she smiled and went back to playing like nothing had happened. I looked around, expecting someone else to react, but the other kids didn't seem to care at all. Some even passed by her and smiled, as if it was completely normal. I stood frozen, heart beating fast. What did I just see? I thought. The air suddenly felt heavier, and the joyful noise of the park seemed distant, muffled. Something wasn't right. Later that day, I walked home with my thoughts still tangled around what I saw at the park. As I reached my porch, Sammy popped up from behind the gate, grinning and holding the game controller again. "Wanna play?" he asked, cheerful as ever. I nodded slowly, still shaken. But as Sammy turned to lead the way, I froze. Swinging behind Sammy, just barely peeking out from under his shirt, was a tail, a short, wagging dog tail. My mouth fell open. Sammy, what is that? Sammy stopped in his tracks. His body tensed. Slowly, he turned around, eyes wide with panic. You saw it. I didn't answer. I just pointed. Sammy's face turned red. I didn't mean for you to. He stammered, then suddenly ran away quickly, out the door and into the yard, disappearing around the corner. I stood in the middle of the room, stunned and speechless. Something strange was happening. I was starting to feel like I don't want to stay in this place any longer. For days, I tried to move on. I forced myself to forget everything. It was hard, but I tried. One lazy afternoon, I wandered into the backyard to check on the small doghouse we built, tucked under a tree. Hey boy, I called gently, expecting to see my furry friend curled up inside. But as I peeked into the little shelter, my blood ran cold. Inside the cramped doghouse wasn't a dog. It was an old man, the same homeless man I had seen licking the tree trunk in the park. He wore the tattered shirt my dog chewed last night. It blinked up at me, crouched like an animal. As I observed its eyes and its manners, it was indeed my dog. I screamed, stumbling back. In a flash, it scrambled out, leapt over the fence, and vanished into the trees behind our yard. Shaking and breathless, I ran inside. Mom, I cried. I already sensed she wouldn't believe me. I was too embarrassed to tell her, but I told her anyway. Panicking, almost crying, I told her about our dog becoming a man. Mom just stared at me, clearly annoyed. Soon, honey, soon. It's just one more week before we go home. I was never a fan of books, but I buried myself in reading anything to avoid going outside. Finally, the day arrived. We were about to leave this strange town. By morning, we were on the road, heading back to our old home in the city. I looked out the car window, the strange town growing smaller behind us. I didn't know what I had witnessed, but I knew one thing for sure. I was glad we were leaving it behind. But a quiet guilt began to creep up inside me. I felt a deep sadness for that old man. I was still young, and fear outweighed my compassion. I can only hope he found a kinder, more loving home than the one I could offer.